At 19, I secretly donated my kidney to save Dorian Vercetti's life after a Mafia attack left him dying. I almost died on the operating table. I woke up alone. No flowers. No thank you. No Dorian. Because someone else had taken my place. This is my story. Let us begin. I had $14, one eviction notice, and a brother who needed medication more than I needed pride. That was the only reason I walked into Vercetti Global. Not courage. Not ambition. Not some inspiring belief that my life was about to change if I just held my chin high and pretended poverty did not have teeth. Poverty had teeth. It had bitten through my mother's funeral savings, Cassian's treatment plan, the little silver bracelet I once swore I would never pawn, and the last soft parts of me that still believed love fixed anything. It had chewed me down to bone and still somehow expected rent by Friday. I stood outside the building with my fingers wrapped around the strap of my cheap black handbag, staring up at the glass tower like it had been built specifically to remind people, like me, where we did not belong. Vercetti Global rose into the morning sky, black steel and mirrored windows slicing through the clouds. No warmth, no welcome, just power polished so clean it became cruel. People moved around me in tailored coats and expensive shoes, carrying coffees that probably cost more than what I had spent on groceries last night. They did not hurry like desperate people. They moved like time worked for them. Mine hunted me. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. For one ugly second, I thought it was the landlord again. I pulled it out with a tight stomach. Cassian. Did you eat? My throat closed. That was my brother. 20 years old, sick enough to terrify me, sweet enough to ask if I had eaten when he was the one who had thrown up his breakfast medication into the kitchen sink. I typed back with fingers that felt too cold. Yes. Focus on resting. I'll call after the interview. A lie. I had not eaten since yesterday afternoon, and that had been half a banana I pretended was lunch, while calculating which bill could survive being ignored another week. The revolving doors whispered open as a woman in a cream suit passed through them. Warm air drifted out, carrying the scent of polished stone, expensive perfume, and money. My feet stayed where they were. For one moment, one weak, shameful moment, I almost turned around. Because I knew this world. Not from inside it, from the edge of it, from the years when I had loved a boy who belonged to it so completely that even his ruin had looked expensive. Dorian Vercetti. The name slid through my chest like a blade finding an old scar. I had spent 10 years teaching myself not to think it. 10 years forcing my hands not to shake when I saw his name in financial magazines, charity articles, society pages, business headlines. 10 years pretending I did not know the exact shape of his mouth when he was trying not to smile. 10 years convincing myself the boy I loved had died long before the man he became could hate me. And now I was walking into his building because my brother needed help and my life had run out of doors. Move, a man muttered behind me. I stepped aside quickly, heat rushing into my face. He brushed past without looking at me. Of course he did. I was the kind of woman people stepped around, not toward. I forced myself through the revolving doors before fear could humiliate me any further. The lobby swallowed me whole. Marble floors shone beneath my worn black flats. The ceiling stretched impossibly high above me, all glass and gold light and cold architectural beauty. A massive black reception desk sat ahead like an altar. Behind it, the Vercetti crest was carved into dark stone, an elegant V wrapped with a serpent, its mouth open like it was laughing at anyone foolish enough to enter hungry. Armed security stood near every entrance, not regular guards, not mall security with radios and bored eyes. These men watched the room like violence was a language they spoke fluently. Black suits, earpieces, clean hands, stillness that did not feel peaceful. My fingers tightened on my bag. One of them looked at me. Not rudely, worse, accurately, as if he could see the loose thread on my sleeve, the carefully cleaned but old shoes, the tiredness under my concealer, the fact that I had ironed my blouse twice, because neatness was the only luxury I could fake. I walked to reception anyway. The woman behind the desk looked up with a practiced smile that managed to be polite without being kind. Good morning, good morning. My voice came out softer than I wanted. I cleared my throat. Mirelle Marin. I'm here for an interview with Human Resources. 10 o'clock. Her fingers moved over the keyboard. I stood very still, trying not to look around too much, trying not to appear impressed, trying not to appear afraid. 2 men passed behind me, speaking low. Vercetti's in before 7 again. He ever leave? Do you want to ask him? A small laugh. Nervous. Quickly killed. I kept my eyes on the receptionist, but the name had already found me. Vercetti. Not Dorian. Never Dorian here. Here he was a last name people lowered their voices around. Another employee joined them near the elevators, balancing a tablet against his chest. He fired Barlow yesterday? For the Singapore mistake? For lying about it. Jesus. No worse. Vercetti. They laughed again, but not comfortably. My stomach tightened. The boy I remembered used to laugh with one corner of his mouth when he thought something was stupid, but did not want to give it the dignity of a full reaction. He had once stolen the last cherry from my milkshake and told me I looked too innocent to survive the world unsupervised. Then he had become the reason I learned how. Marin, the receptionist said. I blinked and looked back at her. Her smile had changed. Not disappeared. Just sharpened with a confusion. She was too professional to show fully. Yes. Your interview location has been updated. My mouth went dry. Updated? She glanced at the screen again, as if hoping it would give her a different answer. Executive level. That must be a mistake. Her eyes lifted to mine. For the first time, I saw something like sympathy. At Vercetti Global, Miss Marin, those kinds of mistakes usually don't survive long enough to reach reception. My pulse began to beat too hard in my neck. Executive level. No, I had applied for an administrative support position in one of the lower departments. Scheduling. Filing. Calls. Anything steady enough to keep Cassian's medicine paid and our apartment door from wearing a sheriff's notice. There was no reason for me to go upstairs, unless someone knew, unless someone remembered, unless the past had teeth too. The receptionist printed a visitor badge and slid it across the black marble surface. Elevator 6. Security will escort you. I thought HR was on the 4th floor. It is. I stared at her. She did not explain. A security guard approached before I could ask another question. Tall, dark-haired, expressionless. Miss Marin. The sound of my name in his mouth made me want to step back. Instead, I lifted my chin with what little dignity I had left. Yes, this way. The lobby suddenly felt too quiet. Or maybe I had gone too aware of everything. The slick whisper of shoes across marble, the soft chime of elevators, the cameras tucked into corners like black eyes. I followed him toward elevator 6. Every step felt like I was walking deeper into a memory that had been waiting 10 years to punish me for surviving it. The elevator doors opened soundlessly. Inside, the walls were smoked glass, reflecting me back in fragments. Pale face, dark hair pinned neatly because I could not afford a salon cut. Gray coat with a missing inner button. A woman trying so hard to look employable, she almost looked breakable. The guard pressed a keycard to the panel. The highest floor lit up. Not executive level. The executive level. My heartbeat stumbled. Wait, I said before I could stop myself. The guard looked at me. I swallowed. Who am I meeting? For a second, nothing in his face moved. Then he said, Mr. Vercetti. The door slid shut, and the ground disappeared beneath me. The elevator climbed too fast. Or maybe my body simply hated knowing where it was going. My reflection trembled in the smoked glass, but I refused to look directly at it. If I saw fear on my own face, I might believe it. So I kept my gaze fixed on the glowing numbers above the doors while the security guard stood beside me like a locked weapon. 38, 39, 40. Every floor carried me closer to a man I had buried without a grave. My palms dampened around the strap of my bag. I wanted to ask the guard if this was normal. If every desperate woman applying for a low-level administrative job got escorted straight into the airless kingdom of Dorian Vercetti. But I already knew the answer. Nothing about me being here was normal. The elevator opened into silence. Not office silence, not the busy hush of people working. This was controlled silence, expensive silence, the kind that made every sound feel like a confession. A long hallway stretched ahead, framed by dark wood, glass walls, and low lights that softened nothing. People sat behind sleek desks with headsets and tablets, moving with the careful efficiency of those who had learned that mistakes here were not corrected. They were punished. Several faces lifted as I stepped out. No one stared openly. That somehow made it worse. They looked at my visitor badge, my coat, my shoes, the security guard beside me. Then they looked away too quickly. I followed the guard down the hall, each step pulling me tighter inside my own skin. At the far end, a wall of glass revealed a boardroom. Men and women sat around a black table long enough to host a funeral. Folders were stacked before them, screens glowed. Coffee steamed untouched beside manicured hands. And at the head of the table stood Dorian Vercetti. My body knew him before my courage did. It betrayed me instantly. My breath stopped. My feet slowed. Something deep and old inside my chest lurched so violently I almost reached for the wall. 10 years had not made him unfamiliar. It had made him worse. The boy I remembered had been beautiful in a dangerous, unfinished way, all sharp cheekbones, restless temper, and eyes that made promises he was too young to understand. The man standing behind that glass looked like power had taken him by the throat and carved him into something colder. Black suit, white shirt, no tie, sleeves buttoned perfectly at his wrists. His hair was darker than memory, controlled in a way that still somehow looked like it resented being touched. He held a pen between two fingers and listened to someone speaking, his face calm enough to frighten the room. Then his gaze moved to the hallway, to me. The pen stopped moving. So did he. No dramatic reaction, no visible shock, no shouted name, just a stillness so sudden that every person in the boardroom seemed to feel it before they understood it. The man speaking trailed off. Dorian did not look away from me. My name was somewhere between us, unsaid and bleeding. The guard opened the boardroom door. Miss Marin? My legs remembered how to move only because collapsing would have been worse. I stepped inside. The air changed around me. Every person at the table turned. I felt their attention like cold fingers pressing into my spine, but I could not look at them. I could only look at him. Dorian's eyes moved over my face slowly, not with warmth, not with longing, with recognition sharpening into something more dangerous than surprise. His jaw tightened once, almost invisibly. Then his expression cleared. That terrified me more than anything else, because I had known Dorian angry. I had known him wounded. I had known him reckless enough to scare grown men and quiet enough to make me feel like the only person alive. But I had never known him like this, still, polished, locked from the inside. Mirelle Marin, he said. My name and his voice nearly broke something in me. Not because it was soft, because it wasn't. Mr. Vercetti, I answered. A flicker moved across his face, too fast to name. One of the women at the table cleared her throat. Mr. Vercetti, we were under the impression Human Resources was handling. I changed my mind. His voice was calm. The woman closed her mouth. Dorian set the pen down with careful precision. Sit. Not please, not would you. Just sit. My spine stiffened, but I sat in the only empty chair at the far end of the table. It placed me opposite him, which felt intentional. Cruel, maybe, or strategic. With Dorian, the difference had always depended on how badly he wanted to hurt someone. A folder lay in front of him. My stomach dropped when I saw my name printed on the tab. He had my file. Of course he had my file. He opened it without looking down. Administrative support, he said. That's what you applied for. Yes, with your experience, you could have applied elsewhere. I did. A man beside me shifted slightly. Dorian's mouth curved. Not a smile, something thinner, meaner. And yet here you are. Heat climbed my neck, but I kept my voice even. Your company called me for an interview. My company calls many people. Then I suppose I was fortunate. His eyes held mine. No, he said quietly. I wouldn't call this fortunate. The room went so still I heard the faint hum of the lights. My fingers pressed together under the table. There he was. Not the boy. Not even the memory. The punishment. Dorian leaned back in his chair, studying me with an ease that felt indecent, as if 10 years had not passed, as if he had a right to look at my face and decide what damage belonged there. Where have you been, Mirelle? The question was too personal for a boardroom. I felt every executive pretend not to notice. Working, I said. For 10 years? Yes. That must have been a very demanding position. A small, nervous cough came from somewhere to my left. Dorian did not look away from me. I swallowed. I've had several jobs. Several, he repeated, as if the word amused him. How industrious. My shame flared hot enough to become anger. I did what I had to do. His gaze sharpened. For one heartbeat, I thought I saw something break through. Not kindness, never that. Something angrier. Something that remembered a girl standing in the rain with mascara under her eyes and a heart stupid enough to still want him to listen. Then it vanished. Why did you leave the city? My pulse stumbled. There it was, the question with teeth. I folded my hands in my lap so he would not see them shake. Personal reasons. Try again. A few heads turned. My mouth dried. I don't discuss my personal life in interviews. Dorian gave a low, humorless laugh. You walked into my building with a resume full of missing years and an expression like someone dragged you here by the throat. Forgive me if I find your professional boundaries sudden and charming. The insult should have humiliated me. It did. But beneath it, worse was the old rhythm. The sharpness. The intelligence. The way he could cut without raising his voice. The way every word felt aimed because Dorian had never wasted ammunition. I lifted my chin. If my resume is unacceptable, you don't have to hire me. Something changed in his eyes. Not softness. Interest. He stood. The entire room reacted without moving. Spines straightened, mouths closed. Even the air seemed to step back. Dorian came around the table slowly, one hand sliding into his pocket. He stopped beside my chair, close enough that I caught the clean, expensive scent of him. Whiskey not drunk, smoke not touched, something darker underneath that memory supplied before I could stop it. He looked down at me. I hated that my heart remembered how to hurt for him. I don't have to do many things, he said. That's one of the benefits of becoming exactly what people expected. I forced myself to meet his eyes. And what did they expect? His mouth tilted. Something unpleasant. It should not have almost made me laugh. That tiny, terrible, almost laugh caught in my throat and died there, because his gaze dropped to my mouth for one dangerous second. Then he stepped back. You're hired. The boardroom shifted. Someone actually whispered, What? Dorian glanced toward the sound. The whisper died. I stood too quickly. I'm sorry. You heard me. I haven't answered enough questions. You answered the important ones. No, I didn't. His eyes returned to mine, cold and bright. Exactly. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. This was not a job. This was a door locking behind me. Mr. Vercetti, I said carefully, if this is because of the past, care for it. Soft. The warning struck harder than if he had shouted. My breath caught. Dorian's face remained composed, but something vicious moved beneath it. A restrained temper. A blade still in its sheath, only because he had decided the room did not deserve the spectacle. He leaned closer, just enough that only I could hear the next part. The past has better manners than you do. It knows when to stay buried. My chest tightened. For a second, I could not breathe. Then he straightened and looked toward the others like I had become a business decision instead of a wound. Miss Marin will report to the executive floor tomorrow morning, directly beneath my office. My stomach dropped. The woman from earlier opened her folder, visibly confused. Mr. Vercetti, there isn't currently a vacancy. Create one. No one argued. Dorian looked at me again. The boy I had loved was nowhere in his face. But the damage he had left inside me stood up like it recognized its maker. I picked up my bag slowly. Am I dismissed? His eyes held mine long enough to make the room disappear. Then, he said, for now. I turned before he could see what that did to me. The guard opened the door. I walked out with every pair of eyes burning into my back and Dorian Vercetti's voice still under my skin. The hallway felt longer leaving than it had entering. I kept my face steady until the elevator doors closed. Only then did I press one trembling hand against the wall. Tomorrow, directly beneath his office. Not mercy, not coincidence, punishment. The elevator descended, but I felt nothing beneath my feet. Just before the doors opened to the lobby, I heard his voice again in memory, quiet enough to ruin me. The past has better manners than you do. I walked out of Vercetti Global with a job I needed, from a man who hated me, in a building that suddenly felt less like salvation than a sentence. And somewhere above me, behind black glass and armed doors, Dorian Vercetti had finally found a way to keep me where he could hurt me. Chapter 2. By 9:15 the next morning, everyone on the executive floor knew I did not belong there. They were too polished to say it out loud. That made it worse. Their eyes did the work for them. I stepped off the elevator with my visitor badge replaced by a temporary employee pass, my stomach empty, my blouse freshly washed in the bathroom sink, and my dignity held together by the thinnest thread God had ever allowed a woman to carry. The executive floor did not look like the rest of the building. It looked quieter, richer, meaner. There were no ringing phones, no crowded cubicles, no messy desks stacked with ordinary human evidence. Everything gleamed. Glass partitions, dark walnut doors, soft gray carpet that swallowed footsteps before they could become noise. Assistants moved between offices with tablets pressed to their chests and expressions calm enough to be expensive. And above us, one floor higher, sat Dorian Vercetti. I felt the knowledge like a hand around the back of my neck, directly beneath his office. He had said it in that boardroom like a sentence, and somehow the building had obeyed him before the sun came up. A desk had appeared for me near the inner corridor, close enough to the private elevator bank that every senior executive passing through could see my face and wonder who I had been to him. Or worse, what I was now. A woman named Sarah met me near reception with a smile that was almost kind. Almost. "You'll be assisting with overflow executive scheduling, document routing, and internal communications," she said briskly, guiding me past a wall of framed awards. "You'll report to Mr. Calder administratively, but all assignments can be redirected by the top floor." The top floor. No one said Dorian's name unless they had to. I noticed that immediately. It was like speaking it too casually might summon him. Sarah stopped beside my desk, sleek, minimal, no personal items. A computer monitor waited darkly, reflecting my face back at me in washed-out glass. "Your login credentials are inside the sealed envelope. Don't lose them. Don't write them down. Don't access anything outside your clearance. If you're unsure, ask before you touch." "I understand." Her gaze flicked over me. Not unkind, exactly. Measuring. "You'll want to be careful here." I placed my handbag under the desk. "With the system? With everything." Then she walked away. I stood there for 1 second longer than necessary, breathing through the strange humiliation of being warned like a child standing too close to a cliff. Then I sat down and got to work. Work, at least, made sense. Passwords, calendars, names, time zones, meeting notes, call transfers. Documents marked confidential in red stamps that made my fingers cautious. I could handle tasks. Tasks did not look at me with old hatred. Tasks did not remember me crying in rain. By 10:30, I had routed 3 schedule conflicts, corrected 2 mislabeled reports, and discovered that the executive floor ran less like an office and more like a court where everyone smiled while calculating where to place the knife. By 11, I understood another thing. Dorian was watching me. Not visibly, not standing over my desk. That would have been easier. This was worse because it came through other people. A message from Sarah appeared on my screen. "Take lunch at 12. Full hour. Mandatory." I stared at it. I had not asked about lunch. 5 minutes later, a man from legal stopped beside my desk with a folder. He looked at the untouched paper cup of water near my keyboard, then at me. "You're supposed to have employee access to the staff dining room." "I know. Use it." I blinked. "Excuse me?" His face tightened as if he hated being the messenger. "That was the instruction." "What instruction?" He looked toward the ceiling, not obviously. Just enough. Then he left the folder on my desk and walked away. My skin went cold. I turned back to my monitor and forced my fingers to keep moving. No. I would not let him do this. I would not let Dorian Vercetti turn a lunch break into a leash. At 12, I stayed at my desk. At 12:14, my phone rang, the internal line. I looked at it for 3 full seconds before answering. "Executive support, Mirelle speaking." Silence. Not empty silence. Occupied silence. My fingers tightened around the receiver. Then his voice came through, low and dry. "You've had this job for 1 morning, Mirelle. Should I be concerned you're already trying to kill yourself from administrative devotion?" The sound of him saying my name without the boardroom between us made my chest hurt. "I'm finishing a routing request." Fascinating. Is the routing request holding you hostage, or is this voluntary martyrdom? Heat crept up my neck. I glanced around, but no one looked directly at me. That meant they were listening. I don't need lunch. Everyone needs lunch. That's why the concept survived civilization. I'm busy. No, you're stubborn. Busy is more productive. My mouth tightened. Was there something work-related you needed, Mr. Vercetti? A pause. Small. Sharp. You always did weaponize politeness when cornered. The receiver felt suddenly heavier. I looked down at the neat stack of folders on my desk because looking anywhere else might make my face betray me. I'm not cornered. No? His voice softened. That was worse. Then go eat. The line clicked dead. I kept the phone against my ear for a second too long. When I lowered it, 3 people found urgent reasons to look at their screens. My pulse beat in my throat. I stood. Not because he told me to, because if I stayed seated after that call, everyone would know he had affected me. The staff dining room was beautiful, of course, not a cafeteria. Nothing here was ordinary enough to be called that. It was all white stone counters, fresh flowers, glass refrigerators filled with perfect salads, soups in copper pots, fruit arranged like still life paintings, coffee machines that looked smarter than most people I knew. Everything smelled warm and expensive. My stomach cramped with hunger so hard I had to pause near the entrance. A woman from finance glanced at my tray as I picked up a small container of soup and the cheapest-looking roll I could find, though nothing had prices because people who belonged here probably did not need to ask. I took a seat alone near the window. For 3 minutes I let myself eat. Not enjoy. That would have required peace. But eat. The soup was hot, creamy, too good. My body accepted it with embarrassing gratitude, and for one fragile moment, I hated Dorian for noticing something I had been trying so hard to hide. That was the real cruelty. Not that he insulted me. Not that he placed me where everyone could whisper. It was that he saw the parts of me I had spent years teaching myself to conceal. The worn shoes, the empty stomach, the careful lies, the survival. When I returned to my desk, a document stack waited beside my keyboard with a handwritten note attached. Review for formatting errors before 2 board call. No signature. I sat down and opened the first file. By 1:45, I had found 7 inconsistencies. By 1:52, I had fixed 6. By 1:58, I discovered the 7th was not mine to fix. A table had been misnumbered in a locked section requiring senior clearance. I sent it back through the proper channel with a note explaining the issue. At 2:03, the private elevator opened. Every conversation stopped. I knew before I looked. Dorian stepped onto the floor like the building had been waiting for permission to breathe. He wore a dark suit today, tie loose at his throat as if it had already irritated him once. 2 men followed behind him, speaking quietly, but he did not answer them. His gaze moved across the floor and landed on me with such immediate precision that my pen slipped against the paper. He noticed. Of course he did. His mouth curved faintly. Then he walked toward my desk, not quickly. Dorian never rushed. Rushing suggested the world had power over him. He stopped in front of me and dropped the corrected document onto my desk. The sound was soft. Somehow everyone heard it. Miss Marin. I stood because every instinct in the room told me to. Mr. Vercetti. He tapped one finger against the document. This went to the board call late. My stomach tightened. The locked section required senior clearance. I routed it correctly. You routed it cautiously. I routed it properly. His eyes sharpened. For 1 second, I thought he might laugh. Instead, he leaned one hand on the edge of my desk, close enough that I saw the faint scar across one knuckle. Properly is what people say when they want safety to sound like competence. The words struck hot. Around us, the floor had gone so silent it felt staged. My face warmed, but I kept my voice steady. Would you have preferred I alter a restricted document without authorization? I would have preferred you solve the problem before it became visible. I swallowed. The humiliation landed exactly where he aimed it. Not because he was entirely wrong, because he said it in front of everyone. I'll remember that, I said. His gaze held mine. Something moved behind his eyes, quick and unreadable. Guilt, maybe. No, I would not give him that. Dorian straightened slowly. See that you do. Then he turned away. The floor breathed again only after the elevator doors closed behind him. I sat down carefully, my hands cold, my spine straight, my face calm, because I had learned long ago that crying in front of powerful people only taught them where to press harder. A message appeared on my screen seconds later. No name, just one line. That was poorly handled. Not the document. Me. I stared at it until the letters blurred. Then another message appeared. Don't make me apologize in person. I'm told it's unpleasant for everyone involved. My breath caught somewhere painful. I did not smile. I absolutely did not. But for the first time since entering Vercetti Global, the wound in my chest changed shape. Not healed, not softened, just disturbed. And that, somehow, frightened me more than his cruelty. I deleted Dorian's message without answering it. Then I sat there for nearly a full minute, staring at the blank corner of my screen like the words had left fingerprints behind. Don't make me apologize in person. That sounded almost like the boy I had known. Not kind. Dorian had never been naturally kind. Not in the gentle way Cassian was. Not in the easy way people praised at dinner tables. His tenderness had always arrived disguised as annoyance. A coat shoved at me because I was shivering. A threat muttered at someone who stood too close. A milkshake stolen only after he had already ordered me another one. But that boy was not sitting one floor above me. That boy had looked at me 10 years ago like I was something dirty on the bottom of his shoe. I placed my hands on the keyboard and forced myself back into the work. By 3 o'clock, the executive floor had decided what I was. A curiosity. That was worse than being disliked. Disliked people could defend themselves. Curiosities were watched, whispered about, passed around in glances over coffee and glass partitions. A woman from acquisitions came by with a file that should have been emailed. A man from international strategy stopped to ask whether I knew where conference room 4 was, though he had clearly worked here for years. Someone laughed too softly near the printer, then stopped when I looked up. I kept my expression calm. Survival had taught me that people became bored faster when you refused to perform pain for them. At 3:27, the private elevator opened again. This time the floor changed before I even saw who had arrived. Not fear. Preparation. Women straightened. Men adjusted jackets. Conversation lowered into something elegant and alert. A woman stepped out like she had never once wondered whether she was welcome anywhere. Vivienne Bellmont. For a moment my hands went completely still over the keyboard. 10 years should have changed her. It hadn't. Not in the ways that mattered. She was still all pale gold beauty and effortless belonging, wrapped in a cream dress that looked soft enough to touch and expensive enough to forbid it. Her hair fell in smooth waves over one shoulder. Diamonds flashed at her ears without needing to announce themselves. She carried no briefcase, no folder, no badge. Of course she didn't. Women like Vivienne did not need permission clipped to their coats. They were expected. Her gaze moved across the floor with lazy confidence. Then it found me. Recognition did not shock her. That was my first warning. Her eyes warmed instead, as if she had discovered an old friend in a place where old friends were rare. That frightened me far more. Mirelle, she said. My name sounded delicate in her mouth, almost affectionate. Several heads turned. I stood because sitting would have felt like giving her the advantage, though somehow she already had it. Vivienne? A small smile touched her lips. It really is you. Yes. How unexpected. There were knives that made less sound. Before I could answer, the office door at the far end opened. Dorian stepped out. He had removed his jacket since the board call. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his forearms now, tie loosened further, phone in one hand, irritation already written into the set of his mouth. He stopped when he saw Vivienne. Not froze. Not like he had with me. He simply paused, as if recalculating a problem he had not wanted on his calendar. Vivienne turned toward him with a smile that belonged in magazines. Dorian. She crossed the distance before anyone could breathe incorrectly and touched his arm. Lightly. Familiarly. Not claiming him loudly. That would have been beneath her. She leaned in and kissed his cheek. The floor pretended not to watch. I watched. God help me, I watched. Every second. Dorian did not return the kiss. He did not smile. He did not step into her. But he did not step away either, and sometimes a woman could bleed from what a man allowed. Vivienne, he said. His voice carried none of the sharpness he used on me. That hurt more than it should have. "How dramatic of you to summon me through 3 assistants," she said. "I didn't summon you." "No, you merely made it impossible for my calls to reach you." Naturally, I became curious. His eyes flicked briefly toward me. So brief, no one else might have caught it. I did. Vivienne caught it too. Something smooth and satisfied moved through her expression before she turned back to him. "You look tired," she said softly. Dorian's mouth curved without warmth. "An epidemic. Everyone keeps telling me that today." "You should sleep. I'll put it before the board." A few people nearby gave restrained smiles, relieved to be allowed to find him amusing. I looked down at my desk. That was the thing about old pain. It did not need much to wake up. A woman touching his arm, his voice not cutting her. An ease I had no right to hate because I had lost the right to anything involving him a decade ago. "Walk with me," Vivienne said. Dorian glanced at his phone. "I have 6 minutes." "How generous. 5 now." She laughed, soft, pretty, practiced. Then they moved past my desk. Vivienne's perfume reached me first, floral and expensive, blooming in the air like a reminder that some women were made for rooms like this. Dorian did not look at me as he passed, but his hand flexed once at his side. I hated myself for noticing. I waited until they disappeared into the glass-walled conference room before I sat down again. My body felt strange, too awake and too hollow at the same time. I reached for the next folder. My fingers missed the edge. The papers slid off the desk and scattered across the floor. Several people looked over. Of course they did. I bent quickly, gathering pages before anyone could help, which meant everyone had time to watch me do it alone. A shadow fell over my hands. For one foolish second, my heart thought Dorian. It was not. Vivienne crouched gracefully beside me, though somehow even that did not make her look lower than anyone else. "Let me," she said. "I have it. I insist." Her fingers brushed one page, then stopped near my wrist. Her smile remained soft. Her eyes did not. "You've been having quite the first day." I gathered the last sheet. "I've had worse. I'm sure you have." The words were gentle enough that no one listening could call them cruel. That was her gift. She made humiliation sound like concern. We stood together. She handed me one page. I took it. For a moment we were close enough that I could see the faint shimmer on her eyelids, the perfection of her lipstick, the way she looked at me like she had already decided where I belonged, and it was nowhere near him. "I was surprised when Dorian mentioned you," she said. My stomach tightened. "He mentioned me?" "Oh." Her brows lifted slightly. "Perhaps I misunderstood. It was more that your name appeared and the room became uncomfortable." I said nothing. Vivienne glanced toward Dorian's office, where the door was now closed. "He has always hated revisiting unpleasant history." There it was, the blade finally drawn. I kept my voice quiet. "Then he shouldn't have hired me." Vivienne studied me with something almost like pity. Almost. "Mirelle." She said my name like I was younger than her, smaller than her, someone still standing outside a ballroom in wet shoes. "Men like Dorian don't always remove painful things." My throat tightened. "Sometimes," she continued, "they keep them close enough to remember why they hardened." I felt the sentence enter me slowly. Not loudly, not dramatically. Deeply. She placed the page on top of my stack and smoothed it with 2 elegant fingers. Then she leaned just close enough for only me to hear. "Dorian doesn't like revisiting painful mistakes." My breath stopped. Vivienne straightened, her expression already warm again for the room. "Good luck here," she said, truly. Then she walked away, leaving the scent of flowers and old humiliation behind her. I sat down. I did not cry. Not at my desk. Not with 30 people pretending not to watch and the man who had once broken my heart sitting behind a closed door 1 floor above my pride. I worked for 23 more minutes. I answered 2 calls. Forwarded 1 report. Corrected a meeting title. Smiled when Sarah asked if I was settling in. Then I walked calmly to the restroom at the end of the hall, stepped inside the largest stall, locked the door, and pressed my fist against my mouth so no one would hear what 10 years had failed to kill. The first sob came out silent. The second hurt worse. By the third, I was shaking so hard I had to sit on the closed toilet lid and bend forward over my knees. Not because Vivienne had won. Not because Dorian belonged to her world and not mine. I had known that. I had learned that under chandeliers, in rain, with my chest cut open from more than surgery. I cried because some stupid, wounded part of me had still wanted Dorian to look at me today and remember something worth protecting. Instead, he had placed me beneath his office like a bruise he wanted to press. And Vivienne had smiled because she knew exactly how much it hurt. When I finally lifted my head, my face was wet, my throat raw, and my hands trembling. A soft chime came from my phone. I pulled it out with blurred eyes. A message from Cassian. How did the interview go? Did they like you? I stared at the question until my vision broke again. Then I typed back with fingers that would not steady. I got the job. For a long moment, I could not make myself send the rest. Finally, I added, everything is going to be okay. I sent the lie, locked my phone, and sat in the stall while the devil's floor waited outside. Chapter 3. The cruelest thing about Dorian Vercetti was that I remembered him before the world finished ruining him. That was what made the second day worse than the first. Not Vivienne's smile, not the executive floor's careful silence, not the way people had started watching me like I was either scandal, bait, or both. It was the memory of a 17-year-old boy leaning against the rusted fence outside my school with blood on his knuckles, a loosened tie, and the bored expression of someone who had just threatened 3 boys and found the whole thing beneath him. I had stormed toward him with my backpack slapping against my hip. Tell me you didn't do what I think you did. Dorian had looked at me through dark lashes, mouth almost curving. That depends. How vivid is your imagination? Dorian. What? They were being irritating. They were talking. They were looking. They have eyes. Unfortunate for them. So I had stopped in front of him, furious, and trying not to show how my heart always stumbled when he waited for me like that. Like the rest of the city could burn and he would still be there, leaning against the fence, pretending he had not arranged his day around mine. You can't threaten every boy who looks at me. He had tilted his head. I can. The question is whether I should. No. He considered that with insulting seriousness. Then he shrugged. Fine. Fine? For today. I had wanted to stay angry, really. I had. But Dorian had been impossible when he chose to be. Sharp and reckless and funny in ways that made other people nervous because they could never tell whether he was joking or deciding where to bury the body. I had reached for his hand and seen the split skin over his knuckles. My anger softened before I could stop it. You're bleeding. He glanced down like the blood belonged to someone else. Barely. Come here. I'm not a wounded dog. No. Dogs are usually easier to manage. That had surprised a laugh out of him, a real one. Quick, low. Gone almost immediately, as if laughter was something he had stolen and did not want witnesses for. I remembered cleaning his knuckles with a tiny first aid kit I kept in my backpack. I remembered him sitting on the curb in his expensive school uniform while I crouched in front of him, dabbing antiseptic onto his skin. I remembered the way he watched me, not like boys watched girls in movies, hungry and obvious, but like I had become a language he was trying to memorize before someone took it away. You're too calm around blood, he had said. You're too casual about causing it. He called you sweet. I had blinked. That was the crime? He said it like he thought sweet meant available. My hands had paused. Dorian's face had hardened. All that dark Vercetti blood rising behind his eyes. You don't hear the way men talk when they think no one dangerous is listening. And you're dangerous? His gaze had lifted to mine. Even then, even at 17, Dorian had known exactly what he was. Not to you. The memory hit me so sharply that I almost dropped the folder in my hands. Present-day Vercetti Global rushed back around me. Glass walls, muted phones, expensive carpet, a printer breathing out confidential documents near my desk. And Dorian, 10 years older and 1 floor above me, was dangerous to me now. Not with fists, with presence, with silence, with the ability to make an ordinary workday feel like standing on the edge of a roof. Mirelle? I looked up too quickly. Sarah stood beside my desk with a tablet tucked against her ribs. Her eyes moved over my face with the kind of quick professional concern people here tried to hide. You okay? Yes. I straightened the folder. Sorry, I was reviewing the Westbridge corrections. You were staring at page 3 for nearly 5 minutes. Heat touched my cheeks. Of course I had been. This floor counted weakness the way banks counted money. I'll have it finished before the meeting. I'm not worried about the file. She glanced toward the private elevator bank, then lowered her voice. Just be careful today. I stilled. Why? Sarah's mouth tightened. He's in a mood. My stomach turned. Dorian in a mood used to mean he went quiet, skipped meals, picked fights he didn't need to win, and stood too close to windows with his hands in his pockets while pretending the weight of his father's expectations did not crush him. Now, apparently, it meant the whole executive floor breathed wrong. What kind of mood? I asked. Sarah gave me a look. The elevator chimed before she could answer. Every conversation around us thinned. Dorian stepped out with 3 men behind him and a phone pressed to his ear. His jacket was unbuttoned, tie loose, hair slightly disturbed like he had dragged a hand through it once and hated himself for the loss of control. He did not look at me at first. That should have helped. It didn't. Then tell Milan they can explain to me personally why they assumed incompetence would age into strategy, he said into the phone. One of the men behind him went pale. Dorian stopped near the center of the floor, listening. His eyes flicked to a clock on the wall. Then, finally, to me. It was brief. It was nothing. It still landed under my ribs. I don't repeat myself because I enjoy hearing my own voice, he said, his gaze still holding mine. Fix it before noon. He ended the call. No goodbye, no wasted courtesy. He handed the phone to one of the men behind him without looking. If they call back with excuses, transfer them to someone less emotionally invested in not firing people. Yes, sir. Dorian started toward his office, then stopped beside my desk. I could feel Sarah disappear without moving. People on this floor had a gift for becoming furniture when Dorian chose a target. Miss Marin? I looked up. Mr. Vercetti? His eyes moved over my face with infuriating precision. You look tired. My fingers tightened around the edge of the folder. That's usually what happens when people work. Dangerous theory. Did you develop it yourself? Years of field research. For half a second, something threatened the corner of his mouth. Not warmth, not forgiveness, but memory knew that almost smile and hated me for recognizing it. Then his expression sharpened again. You left before your shift ended yesterday. My stomach tightened. I completed my work. That wasn't what I said. I had to get home. His gaze did not move, but the air between us changed. Home, he repeated. A simple word. In his mouth, it sounded like an interrogation. Yes. To what? The question was quiet enough that no one else could pretend to hear it clearly. I did not answer. Cassian's name rose inside me, fragile and fiercely protected. His medication bottles lined along our kitchen counter. His thin face sleeping beneath the old blue blanket. His message yesterday asking if they liked me. I would not give Dorian that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. My personal life is still not part of my job description. His jaw tightened. There. A flash. Small enough to miss if you had not once loved every language his body spoke. When people answer simple questions like that, he said softly, I start assuming the truth is worse. Then assume whatever you want. You always did. The words left me before wisdom could stop them. The floor seemed to inhale. Dorian went very still. Not boardroom still. Worse. This was the kind of stillness that meant something inside him had stepped closer to violence without lifting a hand. His eyes held mine. For one strange, terrible second, I was 17 again, standing outside school with his blood on my fingers, telling him no while knowing he listened only because it was me. Then his mouth curved. Dry. Cruel. Careful, Mirelle. Nostalgia doesn't make you bulletproof. The use of my first name made my throat close. I hated that everyone heard it. I hated more that he knew exactly what it did. He turned as if he had already dismissed me, then paused with one hand on the back of my chair. Not touching me, touching the space I occupied. Finish Westbridge, he said, and eat before you start looking tragic enough to make human resources feel useful. Then he walked into his office and shut the door. The floor exhaled in pieces. I stared at the folder until the letters blurred. I wanted to hate him cleanly. God, I wanted that. But memory had teeth, and every time Dorian cut me now, It dragged up the boy who had once sat on a curb and let me bandage his bloody hand because I was the only person he trusted not to flinch. That was the problem. He had become the king of a world that terrified everyone around him. But I remembered the boy beneath the crown. And worse than that, some buried, foolish part of me still believed he remembered me too. I did eat. Not because Dorian told me to, because Sarah appeared 15 minutes later with a paper bag, set it on my desk, and said, "Before you argue, don't. I have a mortgage and no interest in being collateral damage." Then she walked away. Inside the bag was a turkey sandwich, a bottle of water, and a small container of strawberries. No receipt, no note, no proof, which somehow made it more irritating. I stared at the food like it had personally offended me, then took one bite because my stomach did not care about pride. Hunger was humiliating that way. It had no loyalty. The rest of the afternoon sharpened around me. Dorian did not come back out. That should have made the floor easier to breathe in. It didn't. His absence had a presence. People still glanced toward his closed door before saying anything risky. Assistants walked faster near his office. Calls were answered in lower voices. Even laughter stopped before becoming real. I finished Westbridge at 4:42. By 5:15, my eyes burned from staring at the screen. By 6, most of the executive floor had thinned to shadows and low desk lamps. The kind of expensive quiet that made a person feel like every secret had room to echo. I should have left. Cassian would be waiting. His evening medication alarm was set for 7:30, but he hated taking the pills alone. He pretended he didn't because he was too good at protecting me from how much he needed me. I shut down my computer and reached for my bag. Mirelle. My hand stopped on the strap. His voice came from behind me, not loud. It did not need to be. I turned. Dorian stood near the private corridor, one shoulder angled against the glass partition, like he had been there long enough to watch me decide whether to flee. His jacket was gone. His tie hung loose. The sleeves of his shirt were still rolled, exposing forearms marked with faint old scars and clean muscle. He looked tired, not weak, never weak. Just stripped down in some dangerous way, like the office had taken his polish and left the blade underneath. "I'm off the clock," I said. "Congratulations." I gripped my bag. Was there something else? Yes. He pushed away from the glass and walked toward me. I hated that I noticed the rhythm of it. Controlled, unhurried. The walk of a man who had never once worried about whether space would make room for him. He stopped on the other side of my desk. "Why did you come back?" The question hit harder this time. Maybe because there were no witnesses now. Maybe because the floor was dim and quiet and his voice had lost the performance it carried in front of other people. I looked down at the edge of my desk. "I told you yesterday. I needed a job. You needed a job in a city with thousands of companies. Somehow you chose mine. I applied to more than one. And yet here you are. That seems to be your favorite sentence." His mouth flickered. "Barely. Don't flatter yourself. I have several." The almost humor should have made him less frightening. It didn't. It made the air worse because it reminded me that Dorian did not have to be cruel to be dangerous. Sometimes he only had to sound like himself. "I came back because I had to," I said. "For money?" I felt my face close. His eyes sharpened. There it was. The part of him that noticed too much, the part that could find a bruise beneath makeup, a lie beneath manners, fear beneath silence. My silence gave him a door. He stepped through it. "How much?" My stomach dropped. "Excuse me? How much did you need badly enough to walk back into my life?" Heat rose up my throat, fast and humiliating. "You think I came here for money from you?" I think desperate people develop interesting moral flexibility. The words landed like a slap. For a second I could not speak. Then something cold and clear moved through me. "You really did make a religion out of hating me." His jaw tightened. "Good. Let it hurt. Let one sentence find him." "I asked a question," he said. "No, you made an accusation and dressed it better." His eyes held mine, dark and unreadable. "Then, correct me." Cassian's name sat behind my teeth. I could have said it. I could have told him my brother was sick, that the bills had become a living thing, that I had counted coins outside his building and hated myself for needing anything connected to him, that survival had dragged me here by the hair. But Dorian did not get Cassian. Not as a weapon, not as leverage, not as another soft place to press his thumb. My reasons are mine, I said. His expression hardened. Convenient. No, necessary. History suggests you're talented at disappearing when explanations become inconvenient. I went still. The sentence opened something old and ugly between us. Rain, chandeliers, a kiss I had not wanted. His face changing, my voice breaking against his back as he walked away. You never wanted an explanation, I whispered. His eyes flashed. Careful. I have been careful for 10 years. Is that what you call it? No. My voice shook once before I caught it. I call it surviving. For 1 second, the room seemed to lose sound. Dorian looked at me as if the word had annoyed him, or wounded him. I could not tell anymore. Before either of us could speak again, a harsh voice cracked through the corridor behind me. I said get security down here now. I flinched before I could stop myself. Not a small flinch. A whole body recoil, sharp enough that my shoulder nearly struck the desk lamp. Dorian saw it. Of course he saw it. His face changed instantly. The cruelty did not vanish. It redirected. He moved around the desk before I could breathe, placing himself between me and the corridor so naturally, so violently without violence, that for one unbearable second I saw the boy outside my school again. Not to you. A man from legal stumbled into view near the far offices, red-faced and furious, waving a folder while a younger assistant tried to calm him. This is incompetence, he snapped. Do you understand what happens if this reaches? That's enough. Dorian's voice was soft. The man froze. I could not see Dorian's face, only the straight line of his back in front of me, but the entire hallway seemed to understand something I could not. The legal executive lowered the folder slowly. Mr. Vercetti, I didn't ask for a eulogy on your self-control. The assistant went pale. Dorian took 1 step forward. Not fast. Not dramatic. The man still retreated. If you raise your voice on this floor again, Dorian said, do it at someone who signs your severance personally. That way I can save everyone time. I apologize. Not to me. Silence. Then the man turned toward the assistant. I'm sorry. Dorian waited. The man's throat bobbed. That was inappropriate. Look at that, Dorian said. Growth before dinner. It should not have been funny. It was not funny. My chest still hurt. The man left quickly. The assistant disappeared in the opposite direction. Dorian remained where he was for 1 more second, his shoulders tense beneath his shirt. Then he turned back to me. I had not moved. His gaze dropped to my hands. They were shaking. I curled them into fists. Too late. You still hate yelling, he said. My heart stopped. Not because he had noticed tonight, because he remembered. The air between us changed so violently I almost stepped back. Dorian seemed to realize what he had said only after it was already standing there, alive and impossible, between us. His mouth tightened. I swallowed. People change. No, he said quietly. They adapt. Different tragedy. I could not answer that, because for one dangerous moment, he did not look like a man punishing me. He looked like a man who had accidentally touched a memory and found it still breathing. Then his face closed, just like that. The wall came back. You can go, he said. I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, because my legs were trembling, my chest hurt, and this man had spent half an hour trying to cut me open, only to step between me and a raised voice as if his body still remembered what his hatred refused to admit. I grabbed my bag. This time, he let me pass. I walked quickly down the corridor, past the empty desks and glass partitions, toward the elevator. I should have kept walking. I meant to. But near the private elevator bank, I realized I had left my phone beside the keyboard. Cassian. Panic flashed through me. I turned back. The floor was quieter now, most lights dimmed. Dorian's office door was half open, his voice carrying through the gap. I stopped because my name stopped me first. I want everything, he said. A pause. Then his voice again colder. Financials, employment history, addresses, medical connections, family, anyone she speaks to, anyone she owes. My stomach dropped. He was investigating me. I stood frozen near the edge of the corridor, hidden partly by the glass partition. A man's voice answered, faint through speakerphone. Mr. Vercetti, from what I'm seeing already, her life hasn't exactly been easy. Silence. Long enough to become cruel. Then Dorian spoke. I don't care. The words hit me so cleanly I almost made no sound at all. Almost. My breath broke. Inside the office, the silence shifted. I grabbed my phone from the desk with clumsy fingers and made it to the elevator before he could come out. Only when the doors closed did I let my face collapse. Not because he was investigating me. I had expected cruelty. I had expected suspicion. I had even expected punishment. But some part of me, some stupid, ruined, 17-year-old part, had still believed the boy who remembered I hated yelling might care that my life had been hard. He didn't, or he wanted me to believe he didn't. I was not sure which one hurt worse. Chapter 5. 3 weeks after I gave Dorian Vercetti a piece of my body, I stood outside his family's charity gala with a borrowed dress, a healing wound, and the pathetic hope that seeing him alive would hurt less than not knowing. It didn't. Nothing about love hurt less when you were stupid enough to keep carrying it after it had already been buried. The Vercetti estate glittered at the top of the hill like a palace built for beautiful lies. Every window glowed gold against the night. Black cars curved through the circular drive. Men in tuxedos handed keys to valets while women stepped carefully onto the stone walkway in satin, diamonds, and perfume strong enough to survive grief. I stood behind a row of winter hedges, one hand pressed lightly to my side. The incision still pulled when I breathed too deeply. The doctors had told me to rest, not lift, not strain, not push my body before it was ready. But no one had told me how to rest while wondering if Dorian had opened his eyes and asked for me. No one had told me how to heal from being cut open while the man I saved healed somewhere behind locked gates, surrounded by people who had decided I was too poor to exist in the story. I had called the hospital twice after discharge. The first time, they told me no information could be released. The second time, they transferred me until the line went dead. So I came here. Not for thanks, not for money, not even to speak to him. I told myself that a dozen times while standing in the cold with my fingers numb around the small clutch my coworker had lent me. I only needed to see him. One glimpse, one breath, proof that the terrible bargain my body had made with fate had not been for nothing. The invitation had not been mine. A girl from the bakery whose cousin worked event service had slipped me a discarded staff access card with wide eyes and whispered, "If anyone asks, you're helping with dessert." No one asked. People who belonged to this world looked past workers the same way they looked past furniture, flowers, and women like me. That was how I got inside. The foyer opened into impossible warmth. Music poured through the mansion, soft strings beneath the hum of wealth. Chandeliers dripped light over marble floors. Waiters moved with silver trays balanced on gloved hands. Laughter floated through the air, controlled and shining, not too loud, not too real. Everything smelled of champagne, roses, and money old enough to have forgotten where it came from. I kept close to the wall. Every step reminded me of the stitches beneath my dress. The gown I wore was navy, simple, borrowed, and slightly too loose at the waist because I had lost weight after surgery. I had pinned my hair up myself, badly enough that a few strands had already escaped around my face. My lipstick was drugstore red, blotted twice because I had been afraid of looking like I was trying too hard. I was trying too hard, not to be beautiful, to be invisible. I moved through the edge of the ballroom, pretending to adjust trays when people came too close, pretending not to hear names I recognized from Dorian's world. Senators, bankers, judges, men whose wives smiled while their husbands made decisions that could erase families like mine without ever learning our names. Then I saw Vittorio Vercetti near the grand staircase. My body reacted before my mind caught up. I turned away so fast pain flashed through my side. He was speaking with two men in dark suits, his hand resting on the silver head of his cane, his expression calm and carved. Vivienne stood beside him. Of course she did. She wore white, not cream, not pale gold, white. A dress fitted perfectly to her body, her hair swept back, diamonds at her throat. She looked less like a guest and more like a declaration. My stomach turned. I hated that part of me searched near her. Hated that I needed to know, hated that I found him. Dorian stood across the ballroom near the open French doors, alive. My whole body forgot how to hold itself. He was thinner than before, not weak. Dorian could have been bleeding out and still made weakness look like something other people suffered, but sharper, paler beneath the warm lights. His black tuxedo fit him perfectly. One hand rested in his pocket. The other held a glass he did not drink from. He was listening to an older man speak, or pretending to. His face gave nothing away. No pain, no fear, no sign of the machines, the blood, the moment I had seen him unconscious beneath hospital lights, while my own body was being wheeled toward sacrifice. Alive. He was alive. A sound broke in my throat before I could stop it. I pressed my fingers to my mouth. The room blurred. For 3 weeks, I had tried to imagine this moment. I thought relief would feel clean, bright, maybe even beautiful. It wasn't. It was brutal. It hit me so hard I had to grip the wall to stay standing. My knees weakened, my side burned. Tears rushed into my eyes without permission. Dorian shifted slightly, turning his head as if some invisible thread had moved. I stepped behind a passing waiter before his gaze could reach me. No, I was not ready. I did not know what I would do if he looked at me. I did not know what I would survive if he looked away. Mirelle? The voice came from behind me. I stiffened. Lucien Valez stood near the archway leading toward the gallery, handsome in a careless way that had always made people trust him too quickly. He had been Dorian's closest friend once, the easy one, the charming one, the one who could make Dorian roll his eyes and still listen. For a second, seeing him almost comforted me. That was my mistake. Lucien, I whispered. His gaze swept over my face, my borrowed dress, the hand still pressed near my side. Something flickered there. Concern, I thought. Later, I would understand it was opportunity. What are you doing here? He asked softly. I just needed to see him. Lucien looked over his shoulder toward the ballroom, then guided me gently into the gallery where the music dulled behind velvet curtains and oil portraits watched us from the walls. You shouldn't be here. I know. No, Mirelle? His voice lowered. You really shouldn't. The warning sent cold through me. I glanced toward the ballroom. Does he know? Lucien did not answer right away. That silence was the first hand around my throat. Know what? He asked. My eyes searched his face. About the surgery. His expression changed carefully. Too carefully. You mean what you did? I swallowed. Yes. Lucien exhaled and looked away like the truth pained him. My heart began to beat harder. Lucien, he rubbed a hand over his jaw. I don't think this is something you want to hear tonight. Tell me. Mirelle, tell me. His eyes came back to mine, soft with a sadness I wanted desperately to believe. He knows enough. The floor seemed to disappear under me. Enough. Not everything. Not nothing. Enough. What does that mean? Lucien stepped closer, lowering his voice until the words felt private, intimate, almost merciful. It means Dorian survived, and the people around him made sure he understood who was useful during that survival. My mouth went dry. Vivienne. He did not deny it, Behind him, through the archway, I could see her laughing beside Vittorio, one white-gloved hand curled around a champagne flute. "She stayed?" I asked. Lucien's face tightened with something that looked like pity. "She was there when he woke." Pain opened quietly inside me. A clean little door. "And he asked for her?" Lucien looked down. That was answer enough. I turned my face away before he could see it collapse. I had told myself I came here for proof he lived. I had not admitted the uglier truth, that some foolish, fevered part of me had imagined he might see me and understand, that he might look at me with horror, gratitude, regret, anything that proved my love had reached him before Vivienne's world swallowed it whole. Lucien touched my arm. I flinched, but not enough to pull away. "He's different now," Lucien said. "He was always different. Not like this." I forced myself to breathe. "Did he ask about me?" The question left me before pride could kill it. Lucien's expression softened further. Too soft. "Mirelle?" I shook my head once. "Just say it." "He said your name once." Hope struck so fast it hurt. I looked at him. Lucien's eyes held mine. "Then he said he didn't want disruptions." The word landed slowly. Disruptions. My love had cut me open. His world had renamed me a disruption. The music swelled from the ballroom, bright and elegant and cruel. I looked through the archway again. Dorian lifted his glass without drinking. Vivienne stood closer to him now, her white dress catching the chandelier light like a claim. Lucien's hand tightened lightly around my arm. "You need to leave before he sees you," he said. But across the room, as if my name had been spoken loudly enough for fate to hear, Dorian's head turned, and this time there was nowhere left for me to hide. Chapter 6. By Monday morning, Dorian Vercetti knew enough about my life to make cruelty more personal. I felt it before anyone said a word. The executive floor had changed around me again, not in layout, not in routine. The same glass offices stood in the same perfect lines. The same people moved with the same controlled urgency. The same private elevator opened and closed like a mouth that only swallowed powerful men. But the air was different. Thicker. Watchful. I sat at my desk with my hands folded over my keyboard, staring at an inbox full of scheduling requests, while the back of my neck prickled with the horrible certainty that somewhere above me, inside an office, no one entered casually. Dorian had read pieces of my life that did not belong to him. My mother's death, Cassian's diagnosis, the overdue notices, the pharmacy charges, the jobs stacked one on top of another until sleep had become something I visited rather than lived inside. Not the surgery, not the only truth that mattered. But enough. Enough for him to know I had not spent 10 years laughing somewhere soft. Enough for him to know survival had not been elegant to me. Enough, apparently, to make him colder. That was the part I did not understand. A man who hated me should have enjoyed discovering I had suffered. Dorian did not look pleased. He looked worse. At 9:40, his office door opened upstairs. I could not see it from my desk, but the floor felt it. A ripple of attention passed through the assistants near the inner corridor. Someone straightened. Someone else ended a call too quickly. Sarah, 3 desks down, lifted her eyes toward the ceiling for half a second and exhaled through her nose. Then the private elevator descended. The doors opened. Dorian stepped out alone. No entourage today. That made him seem more dangerous, not less. He wore charcoal gray, tie knotted perfectly this time, jaw clean-shaven, expression calm enough to lie. He carried a black folder in one hand. His gaze swept the floor once, not searching, because Dorian never looked like he searched for anything. Still it found me. My pulse tightened. He walked toward my desk. Every person on the floor discovered sudden devotion to work. I stood before he reached me. His mouth tilted faintly. "Training well, Miss Marin?" The words were quiet, only I heard the insult underneath. "I prefer standing before being ordered." "Do you?" His gaze moved over my face. How unexpectedly optimistic. He set the black folder on my desk. I did not touch it. "What is this?" "Conference materials for the Cantrell acquisition." "I haven't been assigned Cantrell." "You have now." My fingers curled against my palm. "That file is senior level. You learn quickly? Or fail publicly?" His eyes held mine. For one second, something flickered there. Anger, yes, but not only anger. Something like frustration sharpened by confusion. As if the facts he had learned about me had inconvenienced a hatred he preferred tidy. "You're very concerned with public failure," he said. "People with less power usually are." The silence that followed was dangerous. His jaw tightened once. Then he leaned slightly closer, his voice dropping. "Power doesn't prevent failure, Mirelle. It only gives people better seats when they watch." The line hit too near the past. The gala, the ballroom, everyone watching me become something ugly in his eyes. I looked away first, hating myself for it. Dorian noticed. Of course he did. His expression cooled further, like he was punishing both of us for the moment touching something real. "Review the file. You'll sit in on the preparatory meeting at 11. My clearance has been updated." "By whom?" His eyes narrowed with dry amusement. "Take a wild guess." I opened my mouth, then closed it. He tapped 2 fingers once on the folder. "Try not to look as if paperwork has personally threatened your bloodline." Then he turned and walked away. I stared after him, furious that some wounded part of me still recognized the shape of his humor even when he used it like a blade. Sarah appeared beside my desk 30 seconds later. "You okay?" "Apparently I've been promoted into disaster." "That happens here." I glanced at the folder. "Is Cantrell bad?" Sarah's mouth tightened. "Cantrell is complicated. At Vercetti Global, does complicated mean difficult or criminal?" "Yes." Despite myself, a laugh almost escaped. Almost. Then Vivienne arrived. She entered through the public elevator this time, as if she wanted the entire floor to watch her cross it. She wore black today. Not morning black, victory black. The dress was elegant, severe, fitted to a body that had never had to choose between medication and rent. Her hair was twisted neatly at the nape of her neck, pearls at her ears, red lipstick quiet enough to seem expensive instead of loud. Conversation softened when she appeared. Not because she held official power here, because everyone understood proximity. Vivienne had proximity to Dorian, and in this building, proximity was its own title. She greeted Sarah by name, smiled at a senior strategist, asked someone from legal about his wife's recovery with such graceful concern that the man looked genuinely moved. Then she reached my desk. "Mirelle," she said warmly, "you're still here." Several people heard. That was the point. I looked up. "Good morning, Vivienne." Her gaze dropped to the black folder on my desk. Something sharpened. "Cantrell," she said. I did not answer. Her smile stayed in place. "Ambitious. It was assigned to me. Of course it was." The way she said it made 3 desks worth of people go still. Not scandalous. Not loud. Just enough to suggest I was being handed things because of Dorian's attention, not because I could handle them. My spine straightened. "Is there something you need?" Vivienne's eyes moved to my blouse. Clean, ironed, simple. One of 2 good work blouses I owned. "No," she said softly. "I was only admiring your resilience." Compliment could be crueler than an insult if the right woman held it. She leaned one hand lightly on my desk. "I don't know how you do it, coming here every day with everyone wondering." My throat tightened. "Wondering what?" "Oh, Mirelle." Her expression became almost tender. "Don't make me say something unkind before lunch." Behind her, 2 assistants looked down quickly. Vivienne straightened and smoothed one non-existent wrinkle from her sleeve. "Dorian can be very intense when something old catches his attention," she said, "but intensity is not the same as importance." There it was again, the clean little knife. I kept my face still. "Thank you for explaining him to me." Her eyes flashed, only once. Then she smiled wider. "You're welcome." Before she could walk away, the private elevator opened again. Dorian stepped out. Vivienne turned toward him instantly, her whole expression softening into something beautiful and practiced. "Dorian?" He stopped, gaze moving from her to me, then to her hand, still resting too close to my folder. "What are you doing?" he asked. His voice was mild. Vivienne smiled. "Saying good morning?" "To the file?" The floor went silent. Vivienne's hand lifted from my desk. For one brief second, her polish cracked. Then she laughed softly. "You're in a mood." "I'm in several. None of them require an audience." Her smile held, but I saw the effort now. Dorian looked at me. "Meeting room 3, 11 sharp." "Yes, Mr. Vercetti." His gaze stayed on mine a second longer than necessary. Then he looked back at Vivienne. "Walk with me if you have business. If you're here to decorate the floor, I'm told we already have orchids." A few people suddenly developed coughs. Vivienne's eyes cooled, but she went with him. Of course she did. I watched them disappear toward the glass corridor, her elegant and composed, him unreadable and sharp enough to cut silence. My hands were steady when I opened the Cantrell file. That surprised me. Or maybe it shouldn't have. There was a strange kind of strength that came from being humiliated so often the body stopped wasting energy on shock. I read the first page, then the second. By the third, I understood why he had handed it to me. Not because it was impossible, because it required seeing what people were trying to hide behind clean numbers and prettier language. And survival had made me very good at reading what powerful people did not say. By the time I walked into meeting room 3, I had found the lie. Not all of it. Not enough to save anyone. But enough to know Cantrell Industries had dressed desperation in expensive language and hoped the Vercettis were too arrogant to check beneath the hem. The room was already full. 7 executives sat around the glass table with tablets, water glasses, and the smooth impatience of people who did not like surprises unless they were the ones delivering them. Sarah stood near the back wall with a notepad. 2 legal advisors whispered over a marked contract. Dorian sat at the head. Of course he did. He did not look up when I entered, but one finger tapped once against the table. The chair to his right was empty. My stomach tightened. No, absolutely not. A senior executive with silver hair and a pinched mouth glanced at me, then at the empty chair and gave a small laugh that pretended to be accidental. I walked to the chair near Sarah instead. Dorian's voice cut through the room without rising. "Miss Marin?" I stopped, his gaze lifted then, sharp and dark. "That chair." I looked at the empty one beside him. Every person in the room looked too. Humiliation burned up my throat, but I crossed the room and sat where he had indicated. Close enough to smell the clean bite of his cologne. Close enough to see that his cufflinks were black onyx. Close enough to feel the heat of his presence and hate my body for recognizing it. He slid a copy of the Cantrell summary toward me. "Begin." My fingers froze on the folder. "Me? You found something." "I sent notes. I read them." The silver-haired executive leaned back. "With respect, Mr. Vercetti, I'm not sure administrative support is the appropriate source for acquisition risk analysis." Dorian did not look at him. That was the first warning. "Then it's fortunate I didn't ask for your certainty." Silence tightened. I opened the file because standing still under Dorian's attention was worse than speaking. "The revenue line for Cantrell's Eastern Distribution Unit doesn't match the shipping volume reported in the appendix," I said, keeping my voice steady. "At first it looks like delayed recognition, but the vendor payments tell a different story." The legal advisor across from me frowned and opened his tablet. I continued before fear could swallow me. "They're showing growth in a region where their logistics costs indicate contraction. Either the revenue is inflated or the liabilities have been moved off report." Dorian leaned back slightly, not relaxed, listening. The silver-haired executive smiled without warmth. "That is an ambitious interpretation." I looked at him. "It's math." His eyes narrowed. Someone coughed into their fist. Dorian's mouth barely moved. "Continue." I turned the page. "The second issue is the pension obligation. They buried it in a footnote instead of reflecting the projected settlement exposure in the main report. If Vercetti absorbs Cantrell clean, that liability becomes yours before it becomes visible." The room shifted. Now people were looking at the file, not me. That should have felt good. It did not. Powerful people only respected usefulness until it became inconvenient. The silver-haired executive, Mr. Halden, according to the nameplate, tapped his pen once against the table. "You learned all of this from an afternoon with the file?" "Yes." His smile sharpened. "Remarkable what desperation can teach a woman." The room went dead. My lungs locked. There were insults that landed on the skin. That one went straight for the bone. Dorian went perfectly still beside me, not the stillness from the boardroom, not the cold, polished silence he used when cutting me. This was different. The temperature in the room seemed to drop around him. Halden realized it too late. He looked toward Dorian and tried to laugh. "I meant only that Miss Marin is clearly very motivated to prove." The glass shattered. Dorian had picked up his water glass and thrown it against the far wall with one sudden, violent motion. No one moved, not even me. Water slid down the wall in clear ribbons. Broken glass glittered across the carpet. Dorian stood slowly. The violence vanished from him as quickly as it had appeared, leaving something worse behind. Control. His voice came soft. Say another word. Halden's face drained of color. Dorian adjusted one cuff with almost bored precision. No? Tragic. I was curious whether stupidity had an encore. Mr. Vercetti, you implied a woman sitting at my table was here because she was desperate instead of capable. Halden swallowed. That was not my intention. Intentions are what incompetent men hide behind when language exposes them. My hands had gone cold in my lap. I could not look at Dorian. I could not look away from the broken glass either. You will apologize to Miss Marin, Dorian said. Halden turned toward me, visibly humiliated. Miss Marin, I apologize. Dorian did not sit. Halden's throat worked. My comment was inappropriate. Again, Dorian said. Halden blinked. Dorian's eyes did not. Make it sincere this time. Pretend your employment depends on it. Imagination can be useful. Halden's face reddened. Miss Marin, I apologize. Your analysis was thorough and valuable. The words should have satisfied me. They didn't. They made me feel exposed, defended, marked. Dorian finally sat, his expression calm again, as if he had not just broken a glass hard enough to terrify a room full of powerful people. Miss Marin, he said. I forced myself to look at him. Finish. So I did. My voice shook only once. No one interrupted me again. By the time the meeting ended, Cantrell was no longer a clean acquisition. It was a problem with a price tag, a liability trail, and 7 executives suddenly willing to admit the file needed deeper review. People left carefully. Halden left first. Dorian remained seated until the room emptied. I gathered my papers quickly. You didn't have to do that, I said before I could stop myself. He looked at the broken glass by the wall. Apparently I did. I could have handled it. Poorly, maybe. My head snapped up. His eyes held mine. Then his mouth curved with that sharp, almost cruel humor. Relax. That was not an invitation to fight. I've had enough disappointing male conversation for one afternoon. I hated that the corner of my mouth wanted to move. I pressed it flat. Dorian noticed. A flicker crossed his face, too quick to trust. Then he stood. You were right about Cantrell. I know. His brow lifted. What? I said. You don't have a monopoly on confidence. No, he said quietly. Just the infrastructure. The answer was so absurdly Dorian that for 1 second I forgot to guard myself. Then he looked at the file in my hands. Go home on time tonight. The warmth vanished. I don't need you monitoring my hours. No, clearly what you need is caffeine, a chair, and someone to physically remove work from your hands before you turn into office folklore. I have responsibilities. His expression sharpened around that word. Responsibilities. Cassian's shadow moved between us, though Dorian still did not know his name from my mouth. Everyone does, he said. Not everyone has the luxury of treating theirs like optional character development. Something dark moved through his eyes. Is that why you came back? Responsibilities? I froze. There it was again. That question, hunting me through every room. I stepped back. The meeting is over. For everyone else, my pulse quickened. Mirelle? No, title this time. Just my name. It made the air smaller. I walked out before he could ask anything else. The rest of the day became punishment by exhaustion. Cantrell revisions, follow-up reports, new scheduling blocks, whispered looks every time someone passed my desk, now different than before. Not pity, not curiosity, fear, because Dorian Vercetti had broken a glass over an insult aimed at me. By 7:30, the floor had emptied again. I stayed because the updated acquisition notes had to be clean by morning, and because going home meant admitting my hands still shook. I was halfway through the final document when a shadow touched my desk. You have an allergy to leaving, Dorian said. I did not look up. And you have an allergy to knocking. This is an open floor. Suffer openly. Silence. Then unexpectedly he laughed. Not much, just once, low and unwilling. The sound hit me in a place I had no defense for. I looked up. He stood beside my desk with his jacket off, tie loosened, one hand in his pocket. He looked tired again, but not dulled. Dorian tired was still sharper than most men fully rested. For one fragile second, the night softened around us. His gaze moved to the untouched coffee by my keyboard, the stack of edits, the way my fingers hovered over the keys instead of typing. "You did well today," he said. The words were simple, too simple. My chest tightened around them anyway. "Don't." His brow shifted. "Don't what?" "Be decent for 5 seconds and make me forget what you were for the other 10 years. His face closed. The softness died so fast it felt like I had imagined it. "There it is," he said. I stood slowly. "There what is?" "The performance." The word hit like a slap. My voice lowered. "Careful." His mouth curved, but nothing about him was amused now. "You vanish for a decade, walk back into my building half-starved and proud enough to make sainthood look casual, then act wounded when the past doesn't greet you with flowers." I stared at him. The old pain rose so violently I almost could not breathe. "You already decided who I was years ago." His eyes flashed. I stepped closer because dignity was the only weapon I had left, and I was tired of holding it quietly. "You decided in 1 second, 1 room, 1 lie you never let me answer. And now every time I breathe near you, you punish me for a story you wrote without me." Dorian went still. Not angry now. Struck. But I did not stay long enough to let that matter. I grabbed my bag, leaving the coffee, the edits, the desk, and the dangerous, almost softness behind. At the elevator, I turned once. He had not moved. Good. Let him stand there with it. "You already decided who I was years ago," I said again, quieter this time. "I'm done helping you prove it." The elevator doors closed between us before his expression could become anything that hurt me more. Chapter 7. The next morning, Vercetti remembered how I took my tea, and somehow that frightened me more than his hatred. It happened at 9:06. I had been at my desk for less than 20 minutes, still pretending I had slept, still pretending I had not replayed the look on his face when the elevator doors closed between us the night before. Not anger, not disgust. Something worse. Something interrupted. Then Sarah appeared beside me holding 2 cups from the executive cafe. "One for you," she said, setting the smaller one on my desk. I blinked at it. I didn't order anything. No one on this floor orders anything. Things simply arrive and we learn to fear the reason. I looked at the cup. The little label on the side read, "Black tea, honey, lemon, no milk." My hands went still, Sarah noticed. "What?" she asked. "Nothing." But it was not nothing, it was a memory. 17-year-old Dorian, leaning across a diner table at midnight, stealing fries off my plate while pretending he hated diner food. Me wrapping both hands around a chipped mug because the heat felt good. Him watching me squeeze lemon into black tea and saying, "You drink like a grandmother with secrets." I had told him tea settled my nerves. He had said, "Then order 2. Your nerves look ambitious." The next week, he had brought me tea after a fight with my mother. Black, honey, lemon, no milk. He had remembered. And apparently 10 years later, he still did. I looked toward the private elevator bank, as if that would explain anything. Sarah followed my gaze and lowered her voice. "Do yourself a favor and don't ask." I wasn't going to. Good. Asking questions here is how people become answers. She walked away before I could decide whether that was advice or a warning. I did not touch the tea for 5 full minutes. Then I drank it because my throat hurt, my body was tired, and pride had never once paid a bill. It tasted exactly the same. That was the cruelty of it. Hatred should not remember details. Hatred should not know lemon. The floor moved around me, all controlled urgency and quiet hierarchy, but I felt watched in a way that had become too precise to mistake. Not constant. Dorian was too disciplined for that. He did not stare openly unless he wanted the room to bleed from it. This was worse. A glance when I reached for a file. A pause when I coughed. A message from Sarah reminding me to take lunch before I forgot I had not said anything about forgetting. At 10:30, I rubbed the inside of my wrist without thinking. An old nervous habit. The private elevator opened a second later. Dorian stepped out with a tablet in one hand and irritation already cut into his posture. His tie was loosened, though it was barely mid-morning. Not careless. Dorian was never careless. It looked more like something had annoyed him enough to make perfection insulting. He crossed the floor while speaking to a department head. "No, Andrew, I understand the proposal. That's the problem. It assumes I suffered a head injury severe enough to approve it." Andrew paled. Dorian's gaze moved. To my hand, to my wrist. I stopped rubbing it. Too late. His eyes lifted to mine. For one unbearable second, the floor disappeared. He remembered that too. I saw it happen. Not because he showed tenderness. He did not. He showed anger. His expression sharpened, almost offended, for as if my old habit had walked into the room uninvited and sat at his table. He looked away first. But his jaw had tightened. Andrew kept talking, unaware he had lost Dorian's attention 3 sentences ago. Dorian cut him off without looking. Send me numbers that belong in this decade, then we'll pretend this conversation never threatened my morning. Andrew fled. Dorian remained near my desk. Not close enough to speak privately. Close enough that everyone noticed. His gaze landed on the teacup. I wanted to turn it around so the label faced away. I did not. Did you need something, Mr. Vercetti? I asked. He looked at me, expression cool. No. Then is this a new management technique? His mouth twitched. Standing? Hovering. Careful. Some departments pay consultants 6 figures to rename hovering as leadership. I should not have almost smiled. I hated that I did. His gaze dropped briefly to my mouth, then away so fast it felt accidental. But Dorian did very little by accident. His expression closed a half-second later, harsher than before. You're late on the revised Cantrell addendum. It isn't due until noon. Then you're early for disappointing me. My spine stiffened. There it was, the punishment after the slip, the slap after the almost smile. I'll have it done, I said. I know. The words were quiet, too quiet. I looked up. He had already turned away. I spent the next hour unable to decide whether he had insulted me or admitted he trusted my work. With Dorian, those were sometimes dressed too similarly. By lunch, I had finished Cantrell and 3 scheduling corrections, ignored the second cup of tea that appeared without explanation, and convinced myself that the pressure in my chest was exhaustion, not him. Then Vivienne arrived. Today she wore pale blue, soft enough to look innocent and expensive enough to make innocence seem like a private club. She paused near the reception console, greeting people with easy grace, but her eyes found me first. Then the teacup. Then the folder on my desk with Dorian's handwriting slashed across a sticky note. Good catch. Fix the second table before legal embarrasses itself. Vivienne's smile did not fade. It refined. She crossed toward me slowly. Vivienne, her gaze skimmed my desk. You've become very busy. That happens at work. How charmingly democratic of you. I kept my hands still on the keyboard. She stepped closer, lowering her voice enough that nearby people could pretend not to hear while hearing everything. Dorian has always had phases. I looked at her. I'm sorry? Intense attention. Sudden irritation. Temporary fascination with problems he thinks only he can solve. The words were too smooth to be accidental. I said nothing. Vivienne's eyes rested on the tea again. He gets bored once the mystery is gone. My stomach tightened, but I did not give her the satisfaction of looking away. If you're worried about his attention, I said softly, maybe you should discuss that with him. Her gaze sharpened. There, a crack, small but real. I'm not worried, she said. No. She smiled. I'm experienced. Before I could answer, a man's voice cut in from behind her. Miss Marin? We both turned. He was younger than most of the men on the executive floor, early 30s maybe, with warm brown skin, a neat beard, and the kind of pleasant confidence that did not immediately feel like a weapon. His badge read, Elias Rohn, External Audit. He held a slim folder in one hand. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said. I was told you caught the Cantrell pension issue. I stood. Yes. That was sharp work. His smile was easy. You saved us from walking into a very expensive trap. Praise, simple and direct, landed strangely after days of Dorian's barbed approval. Thank you. I was hoping to ask how you spotted the vendor discrepancy. It was buried well. Vivienne watched me with an expression I could not read. Of course, I said. I can show you. Elias moved beside my desk, close but not too close, yet respectful in a way that made the past few days feel even more exhausting by comparison. I opened the file and pointed to the first inconsistency. Here. They increased reported revenue, but the distribution payments don't match the volume. Elias leaned slightly to see the screen. His sleeve brushed the back of my chair. Not me. The chair. Still, the air changed. I knew it before I looked. Dorian had stepped out of the private elevator. His gaze moved from Elias to me, then to the inch of space between Elias's hand and my chair. Something in his face went terribly calm. Vivienne saw it too. And for the first time since I had returned to Vercetti Global, I watched fear. Not anger, not jealousy, not calculation, but real fear flash across her beautiful face, because Dorian was not looking at her. He was looking at me. And he looked like he had just remembered something he hated needing. Dorian did not storm across the floor. That would have been easier to survive. He walked, slowly, with that calm, vicious patience that made every person nearby become suddenly interested in pretending they did not exist. Elias was still beside my desk, one hand resting near the file, his attention on the numbers I had just shown him. He had no idea the temperature in the room had changed because of him. Vivienne did. Her smile stayed perfect, but her fingers tightened around the strap of her small black handbag. Dorian stopped at the edge of my desk. "Roan," he said. Elias straightened immediately. "Mr. Vercetti, your external audit." "Yes, sir." "Then I'm fascinated by why you're leaning over my employee's desk as if pension fraud requires proximity." My breath caught. Elias's brows rose slightly. Not offended, just surprised. "I was asking Miss Marin how she caught the Cantrell issue. Did the answer require touching her chair?" The words were mild. The room went silent anyway. Elias glanced at the chair, then back at Dorian. "No." "Then let's celebrate efficiency and stop doing that." Heat rushed into my face. His eyes cut to me. The use of his name had escaped before I could stop it. Something flashed in his expression. Not anger. Not exactly. Possession, maybe, or pain wearing an expensive suit. Vivienne stepped closer with a soft laugh. "Dorian, darling, I'm sure Mr. Roan meant nothing by it." Dorian did not look at her. That is usually how people justify irritating me. Elias cleared his throat, professional but suddenly careful. No disrespect was intended. Good, I prefer disrespect with ambition. I stood because sitting made me feel trapped. He didn't do anything wrong. Dorian's gaze moved slowly back to me. No. Interesting. His mouth curved faintly. "He touched your chair and suddenly I'm expected to applaud modern courtship before lunch." Several people looked down so fast it was almost synchronized. Elias's face warmed. "Mr. Vercetti, I know what you weren't doing. That's why this conversation is still polite." "Enough," I said quietly. Dorian's eyes sharpened. Not because I had raised my voice. I hadn't. Because I had not lowered my eyes. Vivienne watched us with a strange, brittle stillness. All her earlier polish pulled tight over something panicked. Dorian leaned closer, just enough for the floor to feel excluded. "Do you make a habit of defending men who put their hands near things that are not theirs?" My stomach dropped. The past rose so fast I almost tasted rain. Lucien's hand on my wrist, his mouth forced against mine. Dorian's disgust, my voice saying I didn't kiss him. I stepped back from the desk. "You don't get to do that." The words came out softer than I wanted. Dorian went still. Behind him, Vivienne's expression changed. She had heard the wound under the sentence. So had he. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then Dorian's jaw tightened. "Meeting room," he said. "No." His eyes darkened. "Elevator, then." Before I could answer, he turned toward the private elevator bank like the decision had already been made. The entire floor watched me choose. That was the thing about Dorian. He could turn obedience into public theater and make refusal look like fear. I hated him for it. I hated myself more for following. The elevator opened before he reached it, as if the building itself had been trained to anticipate his temper. He stepped inside. I followed because there were too many eyes behind me, and because a part of me was tired of letting Vivienne stand nearby and watch every wound like she owned the knife. The doors closed. The silence became immediate. Private, dangerous. The elevator did not move. Dorian had not pressed a button. I turned to him. "Are you serious?" "Rarely by accident." "Open the doors." "In a moment." "No, now." He looked at me then, really looked, and the force of it stole my next breath. Up close, his control looked thinner, not gone. Dorian's control was a religion, but strained at the edges. His tie was slightly loose, his eyes too bright, his mouth set like he had been biting back words all morning and had finally run out of blood. "Why does it bother you?" I asked. His expression did not change. Be specific. Many things bother me. I keep a rotating list. Elias. His gaze sharpened at the name. There it was. Proof. Tiny. Ugly. Human. You barely know him, I said. I know enough. You know he complimented my work. I also know he was standing too close. He was not. He wanted to. A laugh escaped me. Breathless and wounded. You cannot punish men for thoughts you invented. Dorian stepped closer. Not touching. Never touching. Still, the elevator seemed to shrink around him. I can punish men for breathing incorrectly if they annoy me enough. That is not charming. I wasn't auditioning. No, you were performing. His eyes flashed. For who? For everyone out there. My voice trembled, but I held it. For Vivienne. For yourself. For whatever version of me you decided deserves this. The muscle in his jaw moved once. Vivienne has nothing to do with this. She seems to have something to do with everything. His face shut down. Wrong place, wrong name, wrong wound. Careful, he said. I stepped closer before fear could stop me. Why? Because you hate when I mention her? Or because some part of you knows you let her stand where I used to be? The air changed. Dorian moved so suddenly my back touched the elevator wall before I understood he had closed the distance. His hands landed on either side of me, not on me, against the wall. The space between us turned electric and unbearable. My breath caught. His did too. I saw it. That was what ruined me. Not the anger, not the jealousy, the breath. That tiny, involuntary fracture in the man who pretended nothing could reach him. Do not, he said softly, talk about places you abandoned. The words should have made me shove him away. Instead, pain moved through me so sharply my eyes burned. I didn't abandon you. His eyes searched mine. Cruel, desperate, furious at the possibility. For 1 second, the years between us thinned until I could almost see the boy beneath him. The one who waited outside my school. The one who remembered my tea. The one who once said dangerous things with gentle hands. Dorian lifted one hand from the wall. Slowly, like he hated himself for it. His fingers rose toward my face, stopping inches from my cheek. I should have moved. I should have turned my head. I should have remembered the ballroom, the rain, the disgust in his eyes. But my body remembered before my pride did. My lips parted. His gaze dropped to my mouth. The elevator was too quiet, too warm, too full of everything we had buried badly. Say something useful, he murmured, voice rough now, before I lose what's left of my patience. My pulse thundered. You don't want useful. His hand hovered closer, almost touching. What do I want? The question sounded like it cost him something. I looked up at him, and the truth almost escaped. Me. You wanted me once. Maybe you still do. Instead, I whispered, to be right. His expression twisted, just slightly, enough to feel like blood under glass. His fingers brushed one loose strand of hair near my cheek. Barely. Not even a touch, really. A mistake. A confession. My eyes closed before I could stop them. Dorian went utterly still. When I opened them again, his face was inches from mine, too close. His mouth near enough that one breath could become disaster. I saw the moment he almost did it. The moment hatred, memory, jealousy, grief, and want all pulled him toward me. And, God forgive me, I almost let him. Then the elevator chimed. The sound cut between us like a blade. Dorian stepped back so sharply it felt like being dropped. The doors opened onto the executive floor. Light spilled in, reality with it. Vivienne stood several feet away, waiting. Her face was perfect. Her eyes were not. Dorian looked at me once more, his expression locked down so hard I could barely find the man who had almost touched me. Then he leaned close enough that only I could hear. You still affect me, he whispered. I hate that. He walked out before I could answer. I stayed in the elevator as the doors began to close, one hand pressed against the wall where his had been beside my head, my body still shaking from a kiss that had not happened. And somehow, that made it worse. Because I knew now. Dorian Vercetti did not only hate me, he wanted to. Chapter 8. The worst thing Dorian Vercetti could have done after almost kissing me was show up where I was softest, not at my desk, not in a boardroom, not inside an elevator where his anger had walls to press me against and nowhere useful to go. My apartment, my cracked hallway, my brother's medicine on the kitchen counter, the one place in the world where I had no marble, no polished shoes, no borrowed dignity, just survival stacked in plastic pill organizers. unpaid bills tucked under a chipped blue magnet, and Cassian's too bright smile pretending illness had not stolen half his 20s before he even got there. I found Dorian standing outside my building at 7:12 on a Thursday evening. For one second, I thought exhaustion had finally given me hallucinations with good tailoring. Then he turned from the rusted call box, phone in one hand, black coat open over a dark suit, expression already irritated by the fact that my building existed. My grocery bag nearly slipped from my fingers. "What are you doing here?" His gaze moved over me, not like the men in the lobby did. Not dismissing the cheap coat, the grocery bag, the tiredness. Cataloging, remembering, getting angry at the evidence. "I called," he said. "I was underground on the train." An adventurous excuse. "It's called public transportation. I've heard rumors." I adjusted the grocery bag against my hip. "You didn't answer my question." His eyes flicked to the building behind me, peeling paint near the entrance, one broken exterior light, a stairwell window patched with cardboard from the inside. His mouth tightened. "I came to discuss tomorrow's Cantrell review." "At my apartment?" "I was told you left early." "I left at 6:40. That is not early. That is a miracle. Your definition of miracle is depressing. And your definition of boundaries is missing." His gaze came back to mine. The air changed. Not with the violent heat of the elevator, something quieter, more dangerous because it had no audience. "Are you going to invite me up?" he asked, "or should I stand here and continue lowering the property value?" I should have said no. Every intelligent woman inside me screamed it. "No, Dorian. You do not get this. You do not get the soft brown sofa with the torn seam. You do not get the kitchen where I stretch groceries into meals. You do not get Cassian's laugh or his pill bottles or the way he says my name when pain scares him and he is trying not to show it." But the lobby door opened behind me before I could answer. Mrs. Alvarez from 3B stepped out, carrying a laundry basket and every bit of neighborhood curiosity God had ever distributed to one woman. Her gaze landed on Dorian. Then me. Then Dorian again. Her brows climbed. "Mirelle," she said slowly, "you have company?" Dorian's mouth curved. I felt disaster approaching. "No," I said quickly. "Yes," he said at the same time. Mrs. Alvarez's eyes lit like someone had plugged her directly into gossip. I closed mine for half a second. Dorian looked at her with the polished politeness of a man who could ruin economies before breakfast. "Dorian Vercetti," her laundry basket nearly tilted. "Oh." "Yes," I muttered. "That happens." Dorian glanced at me. "Often?" "Every time you introduce yourself like a lawsuit." Mrs. Alvarez looked delighted. I had two choices. Leave Dorian on the sidewalk where every neighbor with a window would invent an engagement, a scandal, or both, or take him upstairs and attempt to survive the evening privately. I chose the smaller fire. "Fine," I said. 10 minutes. Dorian's eyes narrowed faintly. "How generous." 8 if you keep talking." His almost smile appeared and vanished before I could hate it properly. I unlocked the door and led him inside. The stairwell smelled like old radiator heat, laundry soap, and someone frying onions 2 floors above. Dorian followed behind me without comment, which somehow felt worse than any insult. His silence took inventory. The chipped banister, the dim light, the stain on the second-floor landing. By the time we reached my door, my cheeks were hot. "Say it," I snapped softly, fitting the key into the lock. "Say what? Whatever expensive thought is choking you." He stood too close behind me. Not touching. Never touching when he could unsettle me more by not doing it. I was wondering how long the deadbolt has been loose. My hand stilled. That was not what I expected. I opened the door quickly. "It locks." That wasn't the question. "It's the answer I have." I stepped inside before he could say more. "Cass," I called. "I'm home." A cough came from the living room, followed by the rustle of a blanket. "Did you get crackers?" "Yes." "And the good soup?" "The acceptable soup." "That means the cheap one." "That means the one on sale." I heard Dorian pause behind me. I turned just enough to see his face. For once, no sarcasm arrived. Cassian appeared around the corner in sweatpants and an old hoodie, thinner than he should have been, dark curls messy from the sofa, color sitting wrong beneath his skin. He stopped when he saw Dorian. Then he smiled. Not polite, real. "Oh," Cassian said. "You're him." My stomach dropped. Dorian's gaze shifted to me. I wanted the floor to swallow both of us. Cassian, I said carefully, this is Mr. Vercetti. He's my boss. Cassian leaned one shoulder against the doorway, still smiling like he had discovered a secret I had failed to bury well enough. Mr. Vercetti, he repeated. Right, because we're pretending she doesn't say Dorian like it hurts. My entire soul left my body. Cassian. Dorian looked at my brother. Then, unexpectedly, his mouth curved. Not cruelly, not fully kindly either. Something dry and dangerously amused. You must be the clever one. Cassian's grin widened. Obviously. Unfortunate, I was told Mirelle had one redeeming quality left. This complicates the report. Cassian laughed. Actually laughed. The sound filled the apartment so warmly it hit me in the chest. Dorian heard it too. I saw the moment he did. His expression did not soften exactly, but something in him slowed. Cassian pushed off the doorway. You want soup? It's cheap, but she makes it taste like we're less broke than we are. Cassian, Marin. What? He has eyes. He saw the stairs. Dorian glanced at me. I wanted to disappear. Instead, he said, I've eaten food that cost more and meant less. The room went quiet. Cassian studied him with sudden interest. So did I. Dorian looked away first, toward the kitchen counter where my grocery bag had split slightly, an onion rolling free near the stack of pharmacy receipts I had forgotten to hide. My heart lurched. I stepped forward too late. His gaze had already seen them. The bills, the medication schedule, the orange prescription bottles lined neatly beside the sink. The truth of my life, sitting in plain sight because I had been too tired to disguise it for a man who should never have crossed my threshold. Dorian said nothing. That made it worse. Cassian, unaware of the sudden shift, took the grocery bag from me. I'll help. You'll sit, I said. I'm sick, not ornamental. You're both when you annoy me. Dorian watched us, quietly, too quietly. Cassian carried the bag to the counter anyway, slower than he wanted me to notice. I noticed everything. The way his left hand trembled when he lifted the soup can, the way he braced himself subtly against the counter, the way his smile stayed in place so I would not worry. Dorian noticed too. I hated that he did. Sit down, Dorian said. Cassian blinked. Me? No. The onion. Yes, you. The command was mild. Still, Cassian sat. I stared at Dorian. He looked back at me like daring me to object. I wanted to. Then Cassian coughed into his sleeve and the sound scraped all the pride out of me. I turned to the stove. Fine, I whispered. The apartment became something impossible after that. Me chopping onions with hands that wanted to shake. Cassian asking Dorian questions he had no business asking. Dorian answering almost none of them directly, but somehow making my brother laugh anyway. And all the while, Dorian stood in my small kitchen, too large for it, too expensive for it, too much history for the cracked tile beneath his polished shoes. He should have looked ridiculous there. He didn't. That was the problem. He looked like danger had wandered into my fragile life, and instead of destroying it immediately, had decided to learn where everything breakable was kept. I had never been so aware of the size of my kitchen. Not because it was small. I already knew that. I knew which cabinet door stuck if you pulled too fast. I knew the burner that clicked 3 times before catching. I knew how far I could open the refrigerator before it bumped the little table Cassian and I had dragged in from the curb last spring and pretended was vintage instead of abandoned. But with Dorian standing there, everything looked smaller. The stove, the sink, the unpaid bills half hidden under the fruit bowl. Me. I stirred soup in a chipped pot while Cassian sat at the table with a blanket around his shoulders, watching Dorian like he was the most interesting thing our apartment had ever produced, which, to be fair, he probably was. So, Cassian said, are you always this terrifying, or is this your polite apartment behavior? Cass, I warned. Dorian leaned one shoulder against the counter, arms loosely crossed, gaze flicking from the medication schedule to my brother's pale face before returning to him. This is my friendly setting. Cassian nodded gravely. That's upsetting. I've been told, by people who lived, some. Cassian laughed again, then coughed hard enough that the sound scraped through the room. I turned from the stove instantly. Dorian moved before I did. Not toward Cassian completely, not dramatically. But one step forward, sharp and immediate, as if his body had made a decision before pride could ruin it. Cassian lifted one hand. I'm fine. You are not fine, I said. I'm fine adjacent. That is not a medical category. It should be. I grabbed his water from the table and handed it to him. Cassian took it with a look that asked me not to fuss in front of company. Company. As if Dorian Vercetti was company. As if the man who had once destroyed me, now standing 3 feet from our soup pot, did not make the whole apartment feel like it had tilted into another life. Dorian's gaze stayed on Cassian as he drank, too focused, too quiet. I knew that look now. Dorian collecting details. The kind of tiredness Cassian tried to laugh around, the way his fingers shook after coughing, the pill organizer with morning and evening marked in my handwriting, the cheap blanket pulled carefully around shoulders that had grown too narrow. He saw all of it, and I hated that some shameful part of me wanted him to. Not because I wanted pity. Never pity. But because I had carried this life alone for so long that being seen, even by the wrong man, felt dangerously close to relief. I turned back to the stove. The soup is almost done. Cassian peered into the pot from his chair. Is there enough for Mr. Friendly setting? No, I said too quickly. Dorian's mouth moved. There is, Cassian said. She always says there isn't enough, and then eats half a bowl standing over the sink when she thinks I don't notice. I froze. Dorian's attention shifted to me. Slowly. I kept stirring soup that did not need stirring. Cassian. What? You do. I'm adding less pepper to yours. Emotional blackmail. Medical supervision. Dorian said nothing. That was worse. I served 3 bowls because refusing would make a bigger scene than surrendering. Dorian took his without comment and sat at our little table like he belonged nowhere near it and somehow did not care. His knees nearly touched the opposite chair. Cassian noticed and grinned. You're too tall for our furniture. I'll file a complaint. With who? Your sister. Apparently. She seems to run the building, the kitchen, and your respiratory system. Cassian's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. Then he looked at me. Softly. Too softly. She does. The room changed. I looked down at my bowl. Eat before it gets cold. Cassian obeyed for once. Dorian tasted the soup. I pretended not to watch. His expression gave nothing away. Then he looked at me and said, acceptable. Cassian laughed. That means he likes it. No, Dorian said. That means I'm emotionally restrained. Same thing in Rich. I choked on air. Dorian looked at Cassian for a long second. Then, unbelievably, he laughed. Not the quiet, sharp thing from work. Not the weaponized sound he used when men disappointed him. A real laugh. Brief. Low. Unwilling. But real. It struck me so hard I had to put my spoon down. For 1 second I was 19 again, before hospitals and rain in the ballroom, before my body became proof no one wanted to read. Before Dorian's disgust became the last thing I saw when I closed my eyes. Cassian saw me staring. His smile gentled. That was the problem with my brother. He was sick, not blind. So, Cassian said, dragging the word out with the reckless confidence of someone I absolutely should have smothered with a pillow years ago, how long have you two known each other? My spoon hit the bowl. Dorian's gaze cut to mine. The apartment became very still. Cassian, I said. What? Normal question. No, it is not. It is aggressively normal. Dorian leaned back slightly, one hand around the bowl, but not eating now. A long time, he said. The answer was simple. It hurt anyway. Cassian looked between us. Good long time or disaster long time? Cass. Dorian's mouth curved without humor. Efficient summary. My brother's expression shifted, curiosity softening into something more careful. She doesn't talk about before much. My chest tightened. There's nothing to talk about. Cassian gave me a look. One of the worst things about raising someone after losing your mother was that eventually they knew all your lies by shape alone. You talk in your sleep sometimes, he said. My face went cold. Dorian's eyes lifted. Enough, I said quietly. Cassian heard the warning this time. But he was Cassian, and kindness made him clumsy when he thought he was helping. I just mean, he said, softer now, she's been through a lot. More than people think. She acts like she's made of steel, but after the surgery... The spoon slipped from my fingers. It clattered against the bowl. Dorian went completely still, not visibly dramatic. Worse. The kind of stillness that made every fragile thing in the room aware of itself. Cassian blinked, then looked at me. Too late, he understood. My heart pounded. What surgery? Dorian asked. His voice was calm, too calm. I stood quickly and carried my bowl to the sink, though it was still half full. Cassian is tired. Dorian did not look away from me. Mirelle? No, one word, soft, final. Cassian's eyes moved between us, guilt already flooding his face. I didn't mean... I know. I forced my voice gentle for him. It's okay. It was years ago, Cassian said quickly, looking at Dorian now as if he could repair what he had cracked open. I was younger. I don't know the details. She doesn't talk about it. I just know she almost... Cassian. He stopped. Dorian's hand tightened once around the edge of the table. Almost what? The question hung there. Alive. Hungry. I turned on the faucet and let water hit the bowl too loudly. You should take your evening pills, I said. Cassian looked miserable. Mirelle? Please. That did it. He stood slowly, reaching for the organizer on the counter. His movements were careful now, all the humor drained out of him. Dorian watched the small wince Cassian tried to hide when he stretched for the wrong bottle. I reached it first. Here. Our fingers brushed over the plastic. Cassian squeezed mine once, an apology. I nodded because if I spoke I might fall apart. Dorian rose from the table. The room changed again with his height, his quiet, the weight of everything he was not asking. Yet. I should go, he said. No sarcasm, no insult. That made it worse. Cassian looked up. You don't have to because of me. Dorian's gaze moved over him, and for once, his voice lost its blade. I know. Cassian smiled faintly. You can come back if you don't scare the neighbors into moving. Your neighbors appear resilient. We've survived worse. Dorian looked at me then. The words had landed somewhere neither Cassian nor I intended. His eyes held mine. Yes, they seemed to say. You have. I looked away first. I walked him to the door because not doing so would have been ruder than I had energy for. The hallway beyond smelled faintly of dust and radiator heat. Dorian stepped out, then paused. For a moment, he did not turn around. When he finally did, his face was unreadable, but not untouched. That was new. Your deadbolt is useless, he said. I exhaled, almost laughing because of course that was what he chose. Good night, Dorian. His eyes narrowed slightly at his name. Then, quietly, what surgery? My throat closed. No. You almost died. I gripped the edge of the door. People survive things all the time. Not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. His jaw tightened. The old Dorian would have pushed. The present one looked like he wanted to tear the answer out of the walls. Instead, he stepped back. That restraint unsettled me more than force would have. Lock the door, he said. It doesn't work, remember? His mouth curved. Barely. Try anyway. Then he left. I closed the door and leaned back against it, my hand pressed to my chest as if I could hold my heart still by force. Cassian called softly from the kitchen. I'm sorry. I closed my eyes. Don't be. Outside, footsteps faded down the hall, but Dorian's question stayed behind. What surgery? And for the first time in 10 years, I felt the truth shift beneath its grave. Chapter 9. The first bullet shattered the glass wall behind my desk before anyone had time to scream. For one impossible second, I did not understand the sound. It was too loud to belong to an office, too violent for polished floors, executive calendars, and people who sent emails with words like urgent because they had forgotten what urgency really meant. Then the glass exploded inward. 1,000 bright pieces burst through the air like frozen rain. Someone screamed. I hit the floor hard, my shoulder striking the edge of my desk, pain flashing down my arm, files scattered around me. An alarm began wailing somewhere overhead, sharp and mechanical, slicing the room into panic. Down, someone shouted. Another shot cracked through the floor, then another. The executive level turned into chaos. Not movie chaos, not clean, choreographed violence. Real chaos was uglier, heels skidding against marble, a woman sobbing under a conference table. A man crawling behind a reception console with one hand pressed to his bleeding forehead, phones ringing unanswered. Someone praying in a voice so high and broken I almost did not recognize it as human. I stayed low, breath trapped in my chest. Smoke drifted near the broken glass. My ears rang. For one terrible second, all I could think was, this is Dorian's world. This was the part of him the suits hid, the part money polished, but never erased. The part I had known existed even when we were young, and he stood outside my school with split knuckles, pretending violence was something he controlled instead of something waiting to inherit him. Mirelle? Sarah's voice. I turned sharply. She was crouched near the copy room doorway, one hand gripping the edge of the wall. Blood ran down the side of her neck from a glass cut, but she was looking at someone else. The intern. Nina. 19, maybe 20? Frozen near the center of the corridor with a stack of files clutched to her chest, her face blank with shock. Too exposed, too still. Another shot hit the wall above her. The files flew from her hands. Nina! I shouted. She did not move. Security men surged from the far hall, weapons drawn, voices sharp and low. Someone barked orders into a radio. The private elevator doors were sealed shut, red emergency lights flashing over the panel. I looked toward Dorian's office. Empty hallway. No sign of him. Good, I thought wildly. Then hated myself because relief had no place here. Another crash came from the reception area. The attackers were not fully inside the executive floor. I understood that much through fragments. They were at the service entrance. Security was containing them. This was not a full war, not an invasion meant to take the building. But bullets did not care whether violence was large or small. Nina still had not moved. I crawled toward her first, then rose into a crouch when I realized she was too far to reach fast enough. Mirelle, don't, Sarah screamed. I ran. My body remembered fear, but it also remembered being 19 in a hospital, signing away part of myself because someone I loved might die. Sometimes stupidity and love wore the same face. I slammed into Nina just as another shot cracked. We went down together behind the marble reception barrier. Pain tore across my upper arm, hot and instant, not deep at first, not clear. Just a bright, shocking burn that stole my breath. Nina sobbed against me. I'm sorry, I couldn't move. It's okay. My voice shook, but my hands found her shoulders. Stay down. Keep your head low. Blood slid warm beneath my sleeve. I looked at it stupidly. There was a tear in my blouse near my upper arm, red spreading through the fabric. Glass, maybe. A graze. I did not know. I did not want to know. The hallway thundered with movement. Security pushed forward. Men shouted. One final shot sounded, then a heavy crash. After that, only the alarm remained, and crying, and the awful stunned breathing of people realizing they were alive. Clear! East service secured. 2 detained. Medical to executive. I kept one hand on Nina's back until she stopped shaking enough to breathe. Then the private elevator opened. Not slowly, not normally. It opened like something had forced it. Dorian stepped out. I had seen him angry. I had seen him cruel. I had seen him nearly kiss me with fury burning through his restraint. I had never seen him like this. His jacket was gone. His shirt sleeves were rolled, one cuff smeared with something dark. Blood? Grease? I could not tell. His hair was disordered, his face carved into a kind of calm so violent it made the armed men around him look nervous. He scanned the floor once, fast, brutal, counting bodies, damage, threats. Then he saw me. The entire building might as well have vanished. His expression did not change the way normal people's did. It emptied. That was worse. He crossed the floor toward me with a speed that made 2 security men move out of his way without being told. I tried to stand. Pain flared down my arm. Dorian saw the blood. Mirelle. My name came out stripped. No sarcasm, no title, no weapon, just the sound of something inside him cracking against its cage. I'm fine, I said instantly. His eyes cut to mine. Lie better. Nina clung to my sleeve. She saved me. I froze and she pushed me down and... Dorian looked at her, not cruelly, but with such force that she stopped speaking. Then he turned to the nearest guard. Get her to medical. Nina shook her head. But... Now! Sarah appeared, trembling but steady enough to take Nina's hand. Come on. Mirelle, I'm okay, I told her. Dorian's jaw tightened. Nina was led away. The moment she was out of reach, Dorian crouched in front of me. Not gracefully, not like a king lowering himself for effect, like a man whose body had made the decision before pride could stop it. His hand reached for my arm, then stopped a breath away. May I? The question hit harder than touch would have, because Dorian Vercetti did not ask permission for doors, floors, companies, men, or rooms. But here, with my blood on my sleeve, he asked. I swallowed. It's just a cut. That wasn't the question. My breath trembled. Yes. His fingers closed carefully around my wrist, turning my arm just enough to see the torn fabric. The contact burned through me. Not because it hurt, because it didn't. His touch was steady, controlled, so careful it made my eyes sting. This needs pressure, he said. I said I'm fine. And I said lie better. He pulled a white pocket square from his pocket and pressed it against my arm. The cloth turned red almost immediately. His face went colder. A man from security approached. Sir, we need you in command. Police liaison is waiting. Bellmont's people are asking. Dorian did not look away from my blood. Tell Bellmont's people if they approach this floor before I finish counting my own wounded, I'll give them something personal to discuss. The guard vanished. I stared at him. Dorian, his gaze snapped to mine. There was something wild beneath the calm now. You ran into open fire. She was frozen. You ran into open fire. His voice was softer the second time, more dangerous. I wasn't thinking. That, he said, pressing the cloth tighter, is becoming a theme I despise. Pain sparked. I winced. His face changed instantly. Not much. Enough. Sorry, he said, so quietly I almost missed it. That small word should not have undone me. Not after everything. Not from him. But the floor was broken around us. My arm was bleeding under his hand, and he was looking at me as if the sight of my pain had become a personal offense against whatever order he still believed he controlled. I need to check the wound, he said. Medical can. No. The word was immediate, possessive without being loud. Then he seemed to hear himself and looked away for half a second, jaw flexing. When he looked back, his control had returned, but thinner. Medical is overloaded. You're coming with me. I can walk. I did not ask if you had heroic delusions left in storage. Despite everything, my mouth almost moved. Almost. He saw it. The look between us changed just for a second. Then another shout rose from the far hall, and reality crashed back in. Dorian stood and held out his hand. I stared at it. Blood smeared his fingers from my arm. His hand had once held mine outside a hospital I never wanted to remember. Now it waited in front of me like a choice I did not trust. Mirelle, he said. Not command this time. Not quite plea either. Something worse. Need disguised as impatience. I placed my hand in his. He pulled me up carefully, keeping my injured arm close, his body shifting between me and the shattered glass without hesitation. The floor watched us. I felt every stare. Dorian did not seem to care. Or maybe he cared too much and turned it into threat. He guided me toward the private corridor, one hand hovering near my back but not touching until I swayed. Then his palm settled there, firm, warm, devastating. Where are we going? I asked. His eyes stayed forward. Somewhere no one else gets to watch you bleed. And God help me, I followed him. Dorian took me into a private office I had never seen before and locked the door behind us. Not his office, not a conference room. This one was smaller, hidden behind the executive corridor with dark shelves, a low leather sofa, a medical kit already mounted in a cabinet near the wall, and blinds that darkened the glass until the ruined floor outside became only shadows and red emergency light. Of course the Vercettis had a private room for blood. Of course they did. Sit, he said. I looked at the sofa. I can stand. His eyes cut to me. Mirelle, just my name. No sarcasm, no bite. It landed harder than a command. I sat. The adrenaline had started draining out of me, leaving my body cold and strangely loose. My arm throbbed beneath the bloody pocket square. Somewhere outside the room, voices moved quickly. Security, medical, police. The world Dorian belonged to putting itself back together after violence. Like this was a machine designed to survive being shot at. Dorian opened the medical cabinet with one hand and pulled out gauze, antiseptic, scissors, tape. His movements were controlled. Too controlled. That was how I knew he was angry. Not at me exactly. At the blood, at the attack, at whatever part of the universe had allowed me to run into danger before he could stop it. He knelt in front of me. The sight should have felt victorious. It didn't. It felt intimate in a way I was not prepared to survive. Dorian Vercetti on one knee, his expensive shirt marked with my blood, carefully unwrapping the pocket square from my arm as if one wrong movement might break something neither of us knew how to name. It's a graze, he said after a moment. See, I told you. His gaze lifted. Do not sound pleased about being technically correct after running through gunfire. I didn't run through gunfire. I ran near gunfire. That distinction is so stupid I'm offended on behalf of language. Despite the pain, a breath almost became a laugh. Almost. Then the antiseptic touched my skin and I hissed. Dorian's hand stilled instantly. Sorry. You already said that once today. Careful, it might become a habit. His mouth tightened, but not with anger. Something worse. Something wounded. I wouldn't worry. I'm famously difficult to improve. He kept cleaning the wound, slower now. The sting faded into heat. His fingers were steady against my skin, but I could feel restraint in every touch. He did not hold me harder than necessary, did not take liberties, did not use injury as excuse for possession. That carefulness undid me more than force ever could have. I watched his face, because looking at his hands was worse. A faint line creased between his brows. His lashes cast shadows over his cheeks. His jaw worked once when fresh blood welled beneath the cleaned skin. He looked furious, enough to burn cities and gentle enough to ruin me. You scared Nina, I said, needing words before silence turned dangerous. She was standing upright and conscious. I considered that a successful interaction. You looked at her like she personally shot me. She had proximity to the event. That is not a crime. In my building today, I'm willing to be flexible. I should not have felt warmth at that. It was absurd, dangerous, wrong. But my body was tired, my arm hurt, and his hands were kinder than his mouth. That combination had always been fatal to me. He taped gauze over the cut, then sat back slightly. There. Thank you. The words came out too soft. His eyes lifted to mine. The room seemed to shrink. Outside, someone shouted an order. Inside, neither of us moved. Dorian's gaze dropped to my mouth, then away like he hated himself for noticing. His fingers still rested near my wrist, warm against my pulse. You're shaking, he said. It's adrenaline. It's more than that. You're not my doctor. No, your doctor would probably recommend avoiding bullets. I'm more creative. A quiet breath escaped me. Not a laugh. Not quite. But enough. His expression changed when he heard it. Barely. Then his gaze moved lower, toward the blood on the side of my blouse. You're bleeding there. I looked down. A thin red smear had spread near my ribs, below the edge of my jacket. Not from the arm wound. Probably glass. I had not felt it through the adrenaline. It's nothing. Dorian's face hardened. Your relationship with the word nothing is starting to irritate me. It's a scratch. Then let me see the scratch. My heart stumbled. No. His eyes narrowed. The refusal had come too fast, too sharp. He heard it. Of course he did, Mirelle. I said no. For a second he did not move. Then he stood slowly. Not threatening. Careful. But the air changed anyway. Are you hurt worse than you're saying? No. Then why won't you let me check? Because the scar was there. Because beneath the blouse, below my ribs and curving toward my side, was the proof of the night I gave him what his world stole from me afterward. Because if he saw it, he might ask. Because if he asked, I might finally say something neither of us could survive. I can do it myself, I said. Dorian looked at me for a long moment. Then he handed me a clean cloth and turned around. The simple respect of it nearly broke me. I stood slowly, my knees unsteady, and faced the small mirror near the cabinet. My fingers fumbled with the buttons of my blouse. The top ones opened easily. The lower ones were harder, with one arm bandaged and trembling. I pulled the fabric aside just enough to clean the shallow cut near my ribs. It was nothing. He had been right to check, and I hated that. Then my hand slipped. The blouse shifted wider. In the mirror I saw the scar, pale, long, permanent. A quiet curve carved into my side by love, surgery, and erasure. Behind me, Dorian had turned. I do not know why. Maybe he heard my breath catch. Maybe he had never truly looked away from the danger of me. But when my eyes lifted in the mirror, his were already there. Fixed on the scar. The room died. I pulled the blouse closed too late. Too fast. His face changed, not with recognition. Not fully. But with something primal. Something deeper than thought. A physical understanding before the mind could make sense of it. He took one step toward me. I stepped back and hit the edge of the cabinet. Don't. His gaze lifted from my side to my face. What is that? My throat closed. A scar. His mouth tightened. I can see that. Then don't ask questions you already know the answer to. His eyes darkened. That is not the answer. I clutched the blouse closed with one hand. My injured arm throbbed. My pulse beat everywhere. Dorian, leave it. No. The word was quiet, final. He moved closer slowly this time, like approaching an animal that might bolt. His hand rose, then stopped inches from my waist. He did not touch me, but I felt the almost touch everywhere. When? He asked. I shook my head. His voice dropped. Mirelle. The softness of it hurt worse than anger. My eyes burned, because there were two versions of him in the room suddenly. The man who had looked at me with disgust in a ballroom and the boy who had once trusted me with his bloody hands. Both of them were standing too close. Please, I whispered. The word changed his face. It broke through something. His hand lowered, but he did not step back. The space between us trembled with everything unsaid. His eyes moved over me, not like a man looking at a body, but like a man trying to read a crime scene where the victim refused to identify the weapon. You almost died, he said. Not a question. Cassian's words had stayed with him. I swallowed. People survive things all the time. You said that before. It's still true. It's still not an answer. I looked away. He reached for my chin, stopped himself, and let his hand fall to the cabinet beside my hip instead. The restraint was unbearable. You are terrified of me knowing something, he said. My breath shook. No. His mouth curved, but there was no humor in it. Lie better. The old phrase should have cut. This time it nearly made me cry. His gaze dropped again, not to the scar now, but to the hand clutching my blouse shut. Mirelle, he said, voice rougher, what happened to you? The room tilted. No one had ever asked it like that. Not with accusation, not with pity, with anger on my behalf. That was the dangerous part. Because if Dorian hated me, I could survive him. If he started caring, I had no idea what pieces of me would come loose. I tried to move past him. He shifted, not blocking me entirely, but close enough that my shoulder brushed his chest. The contact snapped through both of us. His hand caught my uninjured wrist, lightly. I could have pulled away. I didn't. His thumb rested over my pulse. My blouse was still half open at the side, the scar hidden by my clenched fist, my breath uneven between us. This was not the elevator. This was worse. Less anger. More ache. His face lowered slightly, drawn by something neither of us had permission to want. My body remembered the almost kiss, remembered the boy, remembered the man, remembered rain and blood and all the places love had gone wrong. Don't, I whispered. But I did not know whether I meant don't touch me, don't ask, don't stop, or don't make me want this after everything. Dorian's eyes searched mine. Then he released my wrist. Slowly, like it cost him, he stepped back. The air rushed in cold. Button your blouse, he said. The words were rough, controlled, almost broken beneath the command. I'm taking you home. I turned away quickly, fumbling the buttons with shaking fingers. He opened the door before I finished, but he did not leave. He stood with his back to me, giving me privacy that felt more intimate than looking. When I was covered, I said, Done. He turned. His face was locked down again. But the damage was there now. I saw it. He knew the scar mattered. He knew I was afraid. He knew Cassian's surgery comment and the scar belonged in the same locked room. He just did not have the key yet. Dorian pulled out his phone. Who are you calling? His gaze stayed on mine. Someone who can open sealed hospital records. My blood went cold. Dorian. He lifted the phone to his ear. His voice, when he spoke, was calm enough to terrify me. I want every sealed medical file from St. Aurelia's 10 years ago reopened tonight. I stopped breathing. His eyes did not leave mine, especially anything with Mirelle Marin's name on it. Chapter 10. The worst part of a buried truth is not the fear that it will stay hidden forever. It is the moment you hear dirt moving above it. I did not sleep after Dorian ordered St. Aurelia's records reopened. Not properly. I lay in bed with my bandaged arm resting carefully on a pillow, Cassian asleep in the next room, and my phone face up on the blanket like it might become a weapon if I stopped watching it. No call came, no message, no black car outside the apartment, no Dorian Vercetti breaking down my door with the truth in his hand and 10 years of hatred finally bleeding at his feet. That should have comforted me. It didn't. Silence had always been one of Dorian's more dangerous languages. By morning, the city looked washed clean from overnight rain, but I felt like something inside me had been dragged raw. Cassian noticed before I even poured his tea. "You look terrible," he said from the kitchen table. "Thank you. That's exactly the kind of tenderness every woman hopes for before 8. You know I mean it lovingly." "I do. Somehow that makes it worse." He smiled, but his eyes dropped to the bandage on my arm. "Does it hurt?" "No. Mirelle? A little?" "That means a lot." "That means a little," with dramatic lighting. His smile faded. I hated that. Cassian had spent too much of his life learning the difference between my real voice and the one I used to keep him from worrying. "Is this about him?" he asked. I turned to the counter and pretended to search for the honey. "Everything is not about Dorian." That sounded like something someone says when everything is absolutely about Dorian. "Take your medicine." Deflection. Classic. "Medicine, Cass." He obeyed, but quietly. That was worse than arguing. When I reached Vercetti Global, security did not greet me the same way. They were polite. Too polite. One guard stepped forward before I reached the metal detectors and said, "Miss Marin, executive elevator is waiting." I stopped. I usually use the employee entrance. "Yes, ma'am." That one word crawled over my skin. No one on the executive floor had ever treated me like I belonged to power. They treated me like scandal, risk, curiosity, or inconvenience. This was new. This was Dorian's doing. I walked into the elevator with my pulse beating too hard beneath my collar. The ride up felt endless. When the doors opened, the floor did not look at me. That was how I knew everyone knew something. Not everything, but enough to be afraid of looking wrong. Sarah met me near my desk, her face tight. "You're to go upstairs." My hand tightened around my bag. "Now?" She nodded once. "What happened?" Her eyes softened. "Mirelle?" Before she could finish, the private elevator opened again. Vivienne stepped out. For the first time since I had known her, she did not look perfect. She was still beautiful. Of course she was. Women like Vivienne could stand in a fire and make the smoke look like styling. But something was wrong beneath the cream silk blouse and pearls. Her face was pale under the makeup. Her mouth looked too red. Her eyes moved across the floor too quickly, searching for what she could not afford to find. Then she saw me. The fear in her expression lasted less than a second, but I saw it. And seeing Vivienne Bellmont afraid was like seeing a cathedral crack down the middle. "Mirelle," she said. Her voice was smooth, almost. I did not answer. She came closer, heels clicking softly against the floor. "You've caused quite a morning." My stomach turned. "What did you do?" I asked. Her eyes sharpened. There she was, the real Vivienne, showing through the silk. Careful. The word should have belonged to Dorian. Coming from her, it sounded borrowed. "No," I said softly. "I don't think I will be." Something in her face tightened. Sarah looked between us like she wanted to disappear. Vivienne stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You have no idea what kind of men built this world, Mirelle." "I know exactly what kind of men built it." Her gaze flicked toward the private elevator. "But you still don't understand what they protect." The elevator chimed. We both turned. Dorian stood inside. He had not come down. He had sent it. Empty. Waiting. Vivienne's face changed again. Not much. Enough. My throat went dry. Sarah touched my arm gently. "Go." I stepped into the elevator. Vivienne moved as if she might follow. Sarah, brave or foolish or both, stepped in front of her. "Mr. Vercetti requested Miss Marin only." Vivienne's eyes slid to Sarah with enough cold to freeze blood. Then the doors closed. The elevator rose one floor. One. That was all. Still, it felt like climbing into judgment. When the doors opened, Dorian's private office waited beyond a short hallway guarded by two men I had never seen before. They did not speak. They opened the door. I walked in and stopped. Dorian's office looked like war had been conducted in silence. Files covered the long black table near the windows. Not business files. Medical files. Legal folders. Old sealed envelopes. Photocopies marked with hospital stamps. Transcripts. Security reports. A laptop sat open beside a half-full glass of whiskey he had not touched. Of course he had not touched it. Dorian stood at the windows with his back to me. No jacket. Sleeves rolled. Tie gone. One hand braced against the glass, the other hanging at his side, fingers curled like he had been holding himself back from breaking every object in the room. I did not move. The door closed behind me. The sound made him turn. I had prepared myself for anger, for accusation, for that cold, brutal sarcasm he used when pain came too close. I had not prepared myself for his face. Dorian looked ruined, not weak, never weak, but stripped of something vital. His eyes were bloodshot, the skin beneath them shadowed. His mouth was set in a hard line that kept threatening to break. He looked at me like I was standing in front of him and lying in a hospital bed at the same time. Mirelle. My name came out rough. I held onto my bag strap with both hands. You called me upstairs. He laughed once. It was a terrible sound, empty. I called you upstairs, he repeated as if the sentence disgusted him. Then he looked toward the table. My eyes followed. A file sat open near the edge. St. Aurelia's Hospital. Emergency renal transplant authorization. My name printed clearly beneath living donor. For a moment I could not hear anything. Not the city outside. Not my own breathing. Not even the old wound inside me screaming that this was the moment I had both feared and wanted for 10 years. Dorian walked to the table slowly. He did not touch the file at first. He stared down at it like paper could become an enemy if hated hard enough. When were you going to tell me? He asked. The question was quiet, not cruel. That made it harder. I swallowed. You weren't supposed to find out like this. His head lifted. Something sharp moved through his eyes, like this. No. His voice dropped. Don't soften it. I found out from a file because you wouldn't answer me. My father sealed the records. St. Aurelia's buried a donor transfer under emergency protections, and someone spent 10 years making sure your name stayed dead. Someone. He did not say Vivienne yet. He did not say Vittorio yet. But the room was full of ghosts wearing their names. You know? I whispered, his face twisted, a small movement, devastating. I know you were a match. I stopped breathing. I know you signed consent at 19. He picked up one page, then dropped it like touching it hurt him. I know they warned you about bleeding, infection, long-term complications, possible death. I know you signed anyway. My eyes burned. Dorian, I know you nearly died afterward. The room blurred. He took one step toward me, then stopped himself like he did not trust his own body near mine. Your blood pressure crashed, he said. There was internal bleeding. They had to take you back in. You were alone. The last word broke differently. Alone. I looked away. That was my mistake. He saw it. Of course he saw it. His breath left him in something almost silent. Mirelle, don't. I was alive because of you. The words entered the room. Final. Irreversible. I closed my eyes. For 10 years, I had imagined what it would feel like if he knew. I thought it would feel like justice. It felt like being cut open again. You were alive, I said, my voice thin. That was all that mattered. No. The force in his voice made my eyes open. He crossed the space between us so suddenly I stepped back. Not because I feared him, because the pain on his face was too much. No, he said again, quieter now. Do not make this beautiful for me. Do not turn it into something clean so I can survive hearing it. My throat closed. He looked down at me, eyes burning with something too fierce to be only guilt. You gave me part of your body, he said, and I... He stopped. His jaw worked. The rest of the sentence stood between us anyway. And I looked at you like filth. Neither of us said it. Both of us heard it. A phone buzzed on the table. Dorian did not move. It buzzed again, then again. His gaze flicked toward it. I saw the name on the screen. Vivienne. Dorian stared at it. Something in his face changed. Cold came back, but it was no longer aimed at me. He reached for the phone, answered, and put it on speaker without taking his eyes off mine. Vivienne's voice spilled into the office, smooth and strained. Dorian, before you decide anything, you need to understand that everyone was only trying to protect you. The room went deathly still. Dorian looked at me, and for the first time in 10 years, I saw the exact moment his hatred turned away from me and found the people who had fed it. Vivienne's voice sat in the room like perfume over blood. Everyone was only trying to protect you. Dorian did not answer right away. That was the first time I truly feared for her, not because he shouted, not because he moved, because he became silent in a way that made even the phone seem afraid to breathe. I stood frozen near the table, my hands curled so tightly around my bag strap that my fingers ached. The open hospital file lay between us, my name printed beside words that had once nearly killed me. Living donor, emergency consent, Post-operative complications. Words clean enough to make sacrifice look administrative. Dorian looked at the phone, then at me. Something in his face had gone beyond anger, beyond guilt, beyond anything I had a name for. It was as if 10 years of hatred had been pulled out of him at once and left nothing but the wound it had been covering. "Protect me," he said. His voice was soft. Vivienne inhaled sharply through the speaker. "Dorian, please. You were injured. You were unstable. Your father thought—" "My father," he repeated. "Not a question. A blade finding bone or—" "He made decisions," Vivienne said quickly. "Hard decisions. Necessary ones. You know what your position was, what the family needed, what the enemies would have done if they realized some girl from nowhere had access to you emotionally and medically." Some girl from nowhere. The phrase should have hurt. It did, but not as much as Dorian's face when he heard it. His eyes lifted to mine, and whatever was left of his control, fractured so slightly, most people would have missed it. I did not. I had loved him before the world taught him how to hide pain. "You knew," he said into the phone. Vivienne went quiet. "Answer me." Her voice changed, less polished now, less certain. "I knew she donated." The room tilted. Hearing it spoken aloud by her was different from knowing. My body remembered the hospital bed, the pain, her pale blue coat, the way she had told me men like Dorian married power. I had spent years trying not to give those memories fresh air. Now they stood in his office, alive and shameless. Dorian's hand closed around the edge of the table. "When?" "After the surgery. You came to my hospital room. Dorian, you stood beside my bed. I was there because I cared about you." He laughed once. It was worse than if he had broken something. "No," he said. "You were there because she couldn't stand." My throat tightened. Vivienne said nothing. Dorian looked at the file again, at the pages spread across the table like a crime scene. "She nearly died. I didn't know how severe." "Do not insult me with selective ignorance." His voice never rose. That made it more brutal. The phone crackled faintly. Then Vivienne said, "Your father sealed the donor records. I didn't have that power. But you accepted the lie. I accepted reality." Dorian's eyes sharpened. "The reality where you let me believe you stayed while she disappeared." A pause. Too long. My stomach dropped. That pause confirmed what the files had not said. Vivienne had not merely stayed silent. She had worn my sacrifice like a stolen dress. "Dorian," she said, softer now, "you needed someone strong beside you." His mouth twisted. For 1 second, I thought he might be sick. And Mirelle was what? Vivienne did not answer. The silence answered for her. Poor. Disposable. Unsuitable. The girl who could bleed but not belong. I turned away from the table because my eyes had begun to burn, and I refused to cry in front of her voice. Dorian saw. Of course he saw. His face changed again, not softer, not healed, but struck by another realization. He lowered his voice. "The gala." My breath caught. "No. Not yet. Not that." Vivienne said, "What about it?" Dorian's gaze stayed on me. The night she came to see me, I could not move. The ballroom returned in flashes, chandeliers, rain beyond the doors, Lucien's grip around my wrist, Dorian's face going dead, Vivienne stepping beside him as if my heartbreak were an opening she had rehearsed. "She shouldn't have been there," Vivienne said. Dorian's jaw tightened. "That wasn't what I asked." "You didn't ask anything." Lucien was with her. Vivienne went silent. The silence was smaller this time, more afraid. Dorian's eyes turned colder than I had ever seen them. What did Lucien do? My breath left me. He did not know. Even now, even with the donor record open, he still did not know that part. I heard myself say, "He kissed me." Dorian looked at me. I forced the rest out before courage could die. I didn't kiss him back. I froze. Then I pushed him away. "You saw the end and decided it was the whole story." The sentence landed between us. 10 years late. Vivienne spoke quickly. "Dorian, she's rewriting it now because—" "Stop." One word. The speaker seemed to go dead under it. Dorian reached for another file on the table. Not hospital this time. Security. Old footage logs, event staff reports. A page with Lucien Valez's name highlighted. His hand shook once as he picked it up. Only once, but I saw it. "There's a service corridor camera," he said. My stomach dropped. He had found it, or someone had. Maybe not the full kiss, maybe not the whole truth in perfect clarity, but enough. Enough to see Lucien move when Dorian approached. enough to prove I had been positioned, cornered, used. Lucien pulled her back, Dorian said, each word quieter than the last. He waited until I was close enough to see. Vivienne said nothing. The silence became confession. Dorian's face lost color. I had seen him furious. I had seen him cruel. I had seen him controlled in ways that frightened powerful men. I had never seen him look like the person he hated most was himself. He placed the paper down carefully. Too carefully. "The night she gave me a kidney," he said, "you took her place." No answer. "The night she came to see if I was alive, Lucien made sure I destroyed her." Still no answer. "And my father buried all of it." Vivienne's voice returned, thin now. "Your father wanted you protected from weakness." Dorian looked at me when she said weakness. The word broke something. Not in me. In him. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. His eyes moved over my face as if every memory had started rearranging itself behind them. The boardroom, the executive floor, the public corrections, the insults, the way he had watched me hungry and tired and still sharpened the knife. He understood. Not just what they did. What he had done with it. "I thought you knew," I said. The words came out barely above breath. Dorian went still. "I thought you knew about the kidney," I continued, "because now that the wound was open, stopping would not save either of us. I thought Vivienne told you. I thought your father told you. I thought you looked at me that night, knew what I had given you, saw Lucien kiss me, and still decided I was disgusting." His face changed. No, not changed. Collapsed inward, like something vital had finally given way. "Mirelle." I stepped back. I could not bear the sound of my name in his voice. "You let me believe that for 10 years. I whispered. His eyes burned. "I didn't know." "I know that now." My throat tightened. "That does not give those years back. Years back." Vivienne was still on the phone, breathing, listening. Dorian looked at the screen as if remembering she existed. When he spoke again, his voice was not loud. It was lethal. "If you hang up, I will find you faster." Vivienne's breath hitched. "Dorian, you will stay exactly where you are until I decide what mercy costs today." He ended the call. The silence afterward was enormous. I stared at him across the wreckage of paper and memory. He looked at me like apology was too small a thing to survive the distance between us. I shook my head once. "Don't. I haven't said anything." "I know." My voice broke. "That's why I'm leaving before you do." He flinched. Actually flinched, but he did not stop me. Maybe he knew he had lost the right. I walked to the door with my heart beating so hard I could feel it in the scar he had finally seen. Behind me his voice came, raw and almost unrecognizable. "Mirelle." I stopped, but I did not turn. If I had known, I closed my eyes. That was the cruelest sentence in the world. If I had known, I opened the door. But you didn't. I stepped into the hall and pulled the door shut behind me. The guards outside looked away instantly, as if grief had rank. I made it 3 steps where something shattered inside Dorian Vercetti's office. Glass. Maybe the untouched whiskey. Maybe something more expensive. Maybe nothing that mattered. Then came a sound I had never heard from him before. Not a shout, not a curse. Something lower, broken, human. I kept walking because if I went back, I would comfort the man who had destroyed me before either of us understood the weapon in his hand, and I was too tired to bleed for him again. Chapter 11. By noon, the woman who stole my sacrifice no longer had a place in Dorian Vercetti's world. I learned it the way people like me always learned what powerful people did. Through whispers, through doors closing too quickly, through assistants pretending not to know things they absolutely knew, through the strange, frightened silence that moved across Vercetti Global like weather. I did not go back upstairs after leaving Dorian's office. I couldn't. My body carried me to the restroom on the lower executive floor, locked me inside a stall, and left me there with my hand pressed over my scar through my blouse, like I could hold the past inside if I pushed hard enough. For 10 years, I had believed Dorian knew. That was the cruelty that had grown roots inside me. Not that he hated me, not even that he believed the kiss, but that somewhere in the wreckage of it all, I thought he knew I had given him part of my body. Knew I had nearly died in a hospital bed alone, and still looked at me like I had disgusted him. Now he knew the truth, and somehow I did not feel free. I felt robbed all over again. because his ignorance did not give back the girl I had been. It did not erase the rain. It did not unmake the ballroom. It did not return the 10 years I spent swallowing grief until it learned how to sit quietly inside my ribs. My phone buzzed sometime after I washed my face. Cassian, you okay? I stared at the message, then typed, long day, I'll call soon. I hated how easily lies came when love needed them. When I finally stepped out of the restroom, Sarah was waiting near the wall. Her face softened when she saw mine. Not pity. Something angrier than pity. Mirelle, she said gently, if you're about to ask if I'm okay, please don't. Her mouth closed. Then she nodded once. Okay. That kindness almost broke me more than the question would have. We walked back toward my desk together in silence. The floor had changed again. Not the uneasy curiosity of my first day. Not the fear after Dorian shattered a glass over Halden's insult. This was different. This was the silence after an execution no one had seen but everyone knew happened. Vivienne's name was everywhere without being spoken. A woman from legal stood near the printer with her hand over her mouth, reading something on her phone. Two executives whispered near the elevator until they saw me, then separated like guilty children. Someone had removed the small vase of white orchids Vivienne always touched when she visited. That detail struck me stupidly hard. The orchids were gone, as if even flowers had been told to choose sides. Sarah leaned close, voice low. The Bellmont Foundation accounts are frozen pending review. I stopped. She looked straight ahead, not at me. 3 joint initiatives canceled. 2 board appointments withdrawn. Her family's access badges revoked. Security escorted her father's counsel out 20 minutes ago. I could not breathe for a second. Dorian had not shouted in front of me. He had not promised revenge. He had simply begun removing Vivienne from power as if cutting rot from bone. And Lucien? I asked before I could stop myself. Sarah's jaw tightened. He was removed from the valet advisory seat this morning, internal privileges revoked, security alert issued on all Vercetti properties. My stomach turned. Lucien. For years, the memory of his mouth forced against mine had lived in a locked room inside me. Now the door had been thrown open, and still the air did not feel clean. What does that mean? Sarah looked at me then. It means Dorian Vercetti decided he no longer counts as family. The words should have satisfied something in me. They didn't. Because Lucien losing power did not undo Dorian's face that night. Vivienne losing access did not erase the sound of him saying, "You shouldn't have come." Vittorio being confronted, because of course he would be, because Dorian would not let his father's hands stay clean now, did not change the fact that the deepest wound had not been made by any of them. It had been made by him. I returned to my desk. That was laughable. Emails blurred. Numbers shifted. My hands hovered above the keyboard. Useless. Every few minutes the private elevator opened or closed. Men I had never seen before moved in and out of the top floor. No one spoke above a murmur. At 3:42 the building seemed to inhale. The private elevator doors opened. Vittorio Vercetti stepped out. I knew him before I saw his face. Some men carried age like softness. Vittorio carried it like a weapon polished daily. He wore a black suit, silver hair immaculate, one hand resting on the head of his cane. His expression did not change when he saw the floor watching him. Then his eyes found me. For one brief moment, he looked at the girl he had once called unsuitable. Not with regret, with recognition. As if I had become inconvenient evidence that refused to stay buried. My fingers curled beneath the desk. He walked past me without speaking. Upstairs, toward Dorian. The doors closed behind him. The floor did not breathe for a long time. No one heard the confrontation clearly. Of course we didn't. Dorian's office was built to swallow secrets. But 20 minutes later, something heavy struck a wall hard enough that every head lifted. Then Dorian's voice. Muffled. Low. Furious. Not screaming. Worse. Controlled enough that the anger had weight. I could not make out the words. I did not need to. At 4:23, Vittorio came down alone. His face was pale now, not frightened. Never that. But stripped of a certainty he had probably worn since birth. He did not look at me this time. That felt better than an apology would have. By 5, I knew I could not stay in that building another minute. I shut down my computer without finishing a single useful task, gathered my bag, and ignored the way half the floor pretended not to notice me leaving early. Sarah caught me by the elevator. "Do you need someone to take you home?" "No, Mirelle. I need one place in my life where Dorian Vercetti's damage does not arrive before I do." She looked like she wanted to argue. Then she stepped back. "Okay." The train ride home felt too bright and too loud. People laughed into phones, balanced grocery bags between their shoes, leaned tired heads against scratched windows. Ordinary misery. Ordinary hope. Ordinary lives that had no idea a man like Dorian could discover the truth at breakfast and dismantle 3 families before dinner. By the time I reached my apartment, my body felt hollowed out. Cassian was asleep on the sofa, one arm thrown over his face, a half-watched movie still glowing on the television. I covered him with the blanket, checked his medication, and stood for a moment listening to him breathe. That sound kept me standing. Not love, not revenge, not Dorian's regret. Cassian breathing. I went to my room and changed out of my blouse slowly, careful around my bandaged arm. In the mirror, the scar looked pale beneath the soft yellow light. For once, I did not cover it immediately. I stared at it. The girl who had signed the consent form had believed love was holy if it was selfless enough. The woman staring back at me knew better. Love could be holy. It could also be used as evidence against you. A knock came at the apartment door. Not loud, not repeated, one firm knock. My whole body knew before I moved. Cassian stirred on the sofa. "Mirelle, got it," I said. My voice sounded calm from very far away. I crossed the living room, looked through the peephole, and closed my eyes. Dorian stood in the hallway. No guards, no coat, no polished empire around him. Just him. Dark shirt, sleeves rolled, hair slightly disordered. One hand braced against the opposite wall, like he had been standing there longer than pride would admit. I opened the door only as far as the chain allowed. His eyes moved over my face. Whatever he saw there hurt him. "Good. What do you want?" I asked. He looked past me once toward the sofa where Cassian had pushed himself upright, then back to me. "To speak to you." "You've spoken." "No." His voice was rough. "I've accused, punished, insulted, misread, destroyed. I have not spoken." My throat tightened. I hated that sentence. I hated the precision of it. I hated that even ruined Dorian still knew where to place words so they entered cleanly. "It's late," I said. "It's 7:15. It feels late." His face flickered. "Pain, then control." "I know." I almost shut the door. I should have. Instead, I slipped the chain free and stepped into the hallway, pulling door partly closed behind me so Cassian would not have to witness another piece of me breaking. The hallway light buzzed overhead. Dorian stood close enough that I could see the exhaustion under his eyes, the faint redness around them, the tension in his mouth. He looked like a man who had spent the day destroying enemies and discovered too late that the person he most wanted to punish wore his own face. "I need to say it," he said. "No." His jaw tightened. Not in anger, in restraint. "You don't know what I'm going to say." "Yes, I do." My voice trembled once. "You're going to tell me you're sorry." He went still, and I'm going to have to stand here and survive the fact that sorry is too small for what you did. His eyes burned. "Mirelle?" "No," the word came out sharper this time. "You do not get to make this clean." "I'm not trying to. You destroyed Vivienne today." His face closed. "She earned worse." "You stripped Lucien. He earned worse too. You confronted your father." A muscle moved in his jaw. "Yes, and none of that fixes me." The words fell between us. Hard. Final. For 1 second, Dorian looked like I had put a hand inside his chest and closed my fist. "I know," he said. The simplicity of it hurt. I looked away. He took one careful step closer, not touching, never touching, unless I gave him permission now. That almost broke me more than if he had reached. "I have spent 10 years hating a woman who never existed," he said. "And every time the real one stood in front of me, I punished her for being innocent in a story I needed her guilty in." My eyes filled. I hated that. I hated him for making me cry again. I turned my face away quickly. Dorian's voice changed. Lower. Rougher. "I gave you my disgust when I should have given you my life." The first tear fell. I wiped it away immediately. Too late. He saw. Of course he saw. Something inside him seemed to break at the sight. "Don't," I whispered. Don't look at me like that now. Like what? Like you finally understand I was bleeding. His breath left him. I looked back at him then, and the deepest wound rose before I could stop it. I gave you part of me, I said, voice breaking around every word, and you looked at me like I disgusted you. Dorian did not move, did not breathe, did not defend himself. The hallway, the apartment, the whole ruined world went silent around that sentence. And for the first time since I had known him, Dorian Vercetti had no weapon left in his hands. Dorian looked like I had killed him with the truth and left him standing. For several seconds he did not speak. The hallway light hummed above us. Somewhere behind my apartment door, Cassian shifted on the sofa, pretending not to listen, pretending he was not worried about the man standing outside our home with 10 years of ruin in his eyes. Dorian's throat moved once. I know. 2 words, no defense, no explanation, no polished cruelty to shield him, just that. I hated that it hurt worse than an excuse would have. You don't know, I whispered. His eyes burned into mine. Then tell me. I laughed once, broken and quiet. Now you want to hear me? His face tightened. The hit landed. Good. Let it land. I let him stand inside one fraction of what he had made me carry. I deserved that, he said. You deserved more. Yes, the agreement stripped the anger out of my next breath before I could use it. I looked away, furious at him, furious at myself, furious that my hands were shaking and some traitorous part of my heart still remembered how safe I used to feel when he stood close. Dorian took one step back, not away, just enough to give me space. That restraint almost undid me. I loved you before the shooting, he said. The words stopped the hallway. I looked at him. His expression was not soft. Dorian did not know how to make pain gentle. It sat on him like a blade pressed inward. I loved you before I understood what that meant, before I had language for it, before I knew whether I was allowed to want anything that did not serve my father, my name, or the empire. His voice roughened. You looked at me like I mattered once. Do you know how dangerous that became for me? My eyes filled again. No. Yes. He looked almost angry at the truth. You made me human in a house that punished weakness. Then I woke up and everyone told me you had vanished. Then I saw you with Lucien, and I took the easiest story because it hurt less than believing you had chosen to leave me. I didn't choose any of this. I know. No, Dorian. My voice cracked. You know now. I needed you to know then. He closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, something in him had torn open. I became a monster because I thought you stopped loving me. The sentence hit so deep I could not breathe, not because it fixed anything, because it explained the shape of the weapon. His hatred had not been empty. It had been grief, wearing armor. I pressed a hand to my mouth, but the sob came anyway. Dorian went still. Seeing me cry hurt him. I saw it. Not the way men dislike tears because they inconvenience them. This looked like punishment. Like each tear carried his name, and he knew it. Don't, he whispered. You don't get to tell me not to cry. I know, I meant... His voice broke once, barely. I meant don't hide it from me. That did it. Something inside me gave way. Not forgiveness. Not surrender. Grief. I covered my face with both hands and cried like the girl in the hospital had never been allowed to. Like the girl in the rain had swallowed too much water and was finally drowning out loud. Like the woman on the executive floor had held herself together so long that breaking felt less like weakness and more like truth. Dorian did not touch me. He stood there, breathing hard, hands curled at his sides, waiting for permission he no longer believed he deserved. I lowered my hands slowly. His eyes searched mine. Can I? He asked. That was all. I should have said no. Maybe a stronger woman would have. But I was not strong in that moment. I was bleeding from places no doctor could see, and I had loved him for so long that even hating him had become a kind of devotion. I nodded once. Dorian stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me, like he was afraid I might disappear if he held too tightly, and afraid I might vanish if he did not hold tightly enough. The first contact broke us both. My face pressed against his chest. His hand came to the back of my head, not forcing, only holding, his other arm locked around my waist with a care that remembered my scar without touching it. I felt him shudder once. Just once. Then he buried his face against my hair. I'm sorry, he said. The words were too small. We both knew it. He said them anyway. Again. Until they stopped sounding like an apology and started sounding like a man trying to place stones over a grave he had dug with his own hands. I pulled back enough to look at him. His face was close. Too close. His eyes dropped to my mouth, then lifted again, asking without words this time. My breath trembled. This doesn't fix it, I whispered. No. I'm still angry. You should be. I don't forgive you. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. I know. And I could not finish. Dorian's eyes burned. Say it. I shook my head. Please, he said, and the word sounded like it cost him blood. I rose onto my toes and kissed him. It was not gentle at first. It was 10 years of grief colliding with 10 years of longing. It was anger and relief and punishment and need, all tangled so tightly I could not tell which one moved my hands to his shirt or which one made his arms close around me, like the world had narrowed to the space between our bodies. Dorian made a rough sound against my mouth and pulled back instantly. Tell me to stop. I looked at him, shaking. I don't want you to stop. His control cracked. He kissed me again, slower this time, deeper in feeling than force, as if he was trying to learn what he had once destroyed. The hallway disappeared. The years folded inward. There was only his mouth, his breath, his hand at my waist, careful of the scar he now knew was his, and my heart beating so hard it hurt. I opened the apartment door with trembling fingers. Cassian was no longer in the living room. His bedroom door was closed. A blanket lay folded on the sofa, almost pointedly. Heat rushed into my face. Dorian noticed, even ruined. Your brother is subtle, he murmured. A broken laugh escaped me. Then the laugh turned into another tear. Dorian touched my cheek with his thumb, not wiping it away like it offended him. Just feeling it. Are you sure? He asked. I looked at the man who had ruined me and the boy who had never really left the wound. No, I whispered, but I choose this moment. His eyes closed briefly as if the word choose had struck him harder than anything else. Then he kissed me like he understood he was being given something fragile, not owed something overdue. We moved to my bedroom in a hush of broken breaths and unfinished words. The door closed softly behind us. He touched me with a reverence that made my anger tremble, with restraint that made every careful movement feel like confession. He kissed the places grief had taught me to hide. He paused when my breath caught. He asked, without speaking. He waited when memory rose too sharply. He let me set the pace even when I felt his control shaking under my hands. And when we finally crossed the line we had spent 10 years bleeding around, it was not clean. It was not simple. It was grief turning into warmth. It was old love surviving under ash. It was me crying against his shoulder while he held me through it, whispering my name like he was afraid saying it wrong would hurt me. It was Dorian. It was dangerous and broken and still careful, keeping one hand over mine when the emotion became too much. Afterward, he did not act like he had earned anything. He did not smile like forgiveness had been granted. He pulled the blanket around me first. Then he brought water from the kitchen, without asking where the glasses were, because of course he had noticed earlier. He checked my bandaged arm with quiet hands. He sat beside me on the bed, fully awake, fully present, looking at me like sleep would be an insult to what had just happened. I drank the water because my throat hurt. He took the glass and set it down. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then Dorian leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head bowed. I became a monster because I thought you stopped loving me. His voice was low, destroyed. I stared at his profile in the dim light, and the answer came from the deepest, most wounded part of me. And I became a ghost because you made me believe loving you was the dirtiest thing I had ever done. Dorian closed his eyes. He did not touch me this time. He only sat there and took the sentence exactly as he deserved, and somehow that was the first honest thing between us that did not bleed. Chapter 12. The morning after Dorian Vercetti held me like grief had hands, he did not pretend I belonged to him. That was how I knew something had changed. Not fixed. Changed. There was a difference, and I had survived too much to confuse the two. I woke before sunrise with my cheek pressed into my pillow, my body heavy with exhaustion, my heart still bruised from the night before. For one disoriented second, I thought I had dreamed him. The hallway confession. His arms around me. The way he had said sorry like a man trying to crawl back through 10 years with broken hands. Then I turned my head. Dorian sat in the chair near my bedroom window. Not asleep. Not watching me in that dark, possessive way powerful men in stories did when they thought wanting was the same thing as love. He sat with his elbows on his knees, his hands loosely clasped, his head bowed. His shirt was still wrinkled from last night. His hair was disordered. The sharp, immaculate dawn of Vercetti Global looked almost human in the gray morning light. Almost. The danger was still there. It would always be there. Dorian did not become harmless because he was sorry. But he had pulled a blanket over me. He had not climbed back into bed without being invited. He had not used the intimacy between us like a receipt. That mattered. I shifted slightly. His head lifted at once. Of course it did. "You're awake," he said. His voice was low from lack of sleep. "You're sitting in my chair." His mouth curved faintly. "A vicious crime. Should I call legal?" I did not smile. Not fully, but something inside me loosened by one painful thread. "Did you sleep?" "No, Dorian. I tried." "You sat in a chair and stared at the floor." I said I tried. I did not claim excellence. That sounded like him. Not the polished predator from the boardroom, not the broken man from the hallway. Him, the man between both things. I pushed myself upright carefully. My bandaged arm tugged and his gaze dropped to it immediately. His body shifted like he wanted to stand. He did not. He waited. The restraint was so visible it almost hurt to look at. "I'm fine," I said. His eyes lifted to mine. "Lie better." The old phrase should have made me ache. It did, but this time there was no cruelty in it, only tired recognition. "I'm sore," I admitted. His jaw tightened, not at me, at the fact of pain existing near me. "I can change the bandage. I can do it. I know." Silence settled, not empty. "Careful." He stood then, slowly, giving me room to object. "Cassian's awake." My heart jumped. "What?" "He's in the kitchen. I heard him moving around." I threw the blanket aside. "Why didn't you wake me?" "Because he told me if I did, he would throw a spoon at me." Despite myself, I blinked. Dorian's expression remained perfectly serious. "A small spoon," he added, but his intent was clear. A laugh slipped out before I could stop it. Small, cracked, dangerous. Dorian went still at the sound, not triumphant, not relieved, just struck, as if my laughter was something he had no right to receive and no strength to refuse. I looked away first. Cassian shouldn't be making breakfast. He isn't. He was attempting to reach a mug from the highest shelf for reasons I assume were pride-related. And I moved the mugs. My head turned back to him. He lifted one shoulder. Lower cabinet, less theatrical risk. Something in my chest tightened. "You rearranged my kitchen?" "Only the dangerous geography." "Dorian." "I know." His mouth tightened. I asked him first. That stopped me. He looked almost irritated with himself. He said yes, then called me bossy in a way that suggested he expected to survive it. He does that. I noticed. The room went quiet again. This was the kind of care I did not know what to do with. Not flowers, not dramatic speeches, not money thrown at pain until it looked managed. A mug moved to a lower shelf. A brother allowed dignity before assistance. A dangerous man learning that help could not feel like control. I stood and found my robe at the end of the bed. Dorian turned his back immediately. The motion was so quick, so respectful, so unlike the man who had once used every room as if it were already his, that my throat tightened. "You don't have to do that," I said. He did not turn around. "Yes," he said. "I do." I tied the robe with fingers that trembled. When we stepped into the kitchen, Cassian was sitting at the table with a cup of tea and a face far too innocent to be trusted. "Morning," he said. I narrowed my eyes. "What did you do?" "Why would you assume I did something?" "Because you're awake and smug." "I am chronically charming. People confuse it with smug." Dorian, leaning against the counter with a cup of black coffee he had apparently made but not drunk, said, "They don't." Cassian grinned at him. My heart did something painful. They looked too natural together. That was the problem. Dorian standing in my kitchen should have felt like an invasion. Instead, he had already found the coffee filters, moved the mugs, and somehow earned Cassian's morning insults. Cassian looked between us, and his expression softened in a way that made panic rise in me. "No." I could handle Dorian's regret. I could not handle Cassian hoping. Hope was too expensive. "How's your arm?" Cassian asked. "Sore." His eyes widened. She admitted pain. "Mark the calendar." Dorian looked into his coffee. "I'll inform the board." "Good. Make it a formal announcement." I pulled open the fridge because if I kept watching them I might cry over something ridiculous, like two men being sarcastic near expired milk. A white pharmacy bag sat on the top shelf. I froze. It had not been there last night. Slowly I took it out. Cassian's name was printed on the label. Not one bottle, several. Refills. All of them. My pulse changed. I turned. Dorian's face closed before I spoke. "What is this?" Cassian went quiet. Dorian set down the coffee he had not touched. "Medication." "I can see that." "Then the label is working." "Do not joke." His mouth shut. "Good." I held up the bag. "Did you pay for these?" "Yes." The word landed too cleanly. Anger rose fast because fear was under it. "You had no right." "I know." That stopped me for half a second. Then I found my voice again. "You don't get to walk in here and start fixing things because guilt is making you generous." His jaw tightened. "I know that too." "Do you?" My hand shook around the bag. "And because this looks a lot like power. It looks a lot like you deciding my life is now another acquisition you can stabilize." Cassian whispered. "Mirelle?" "No." I looked at him, then back at Dorian. "No, he needs to hear this." Dorian did not defend himself. He stood there and took it. That made me angrier and sadder at the same time. "I have spent years choosing which bill gets paid and which one gets threatened," I said. "I have stood in pharmacies pretending I forgot my wallet because the total was too high. I have watered down soup and lied to my brother and smiled at landlords who looked at me like rent was a moral test." My voice broke. "You do not get to make one phone call and turn my survival into something you sponsor." Dorian's face changed. A flinch hidden inside stillness. "I didn't pay because I thought you were incapable," he said. "Then why?" His eyes held mine. "Because Cassian needs them today." The kitchen went silent. Simple, brutal, true. I hated that it reached me. Dorian continued, voice rougher now. "I called the pharmacy because your refill schedule was taped beside the sink. I asked what was ready. I paid the invoice under Cassian's name and had them deliver it. No debt, no account tied to you, no conditions." I swallowed hard. "You still should have asked." "Yes." That answer hurt more than argument. Cassian looked down at his tea. I set the bag on the counter slowly. Dorian took one step closer, then stopped himself. "I am learning the difference," he said. My throat tightened. "Between what?" "Protecting you and taking from you." The words entered me quietly. I looked at him, at the dangerous man standing in my tiny kitchen with exhaustion under his eyes and guilt held so tightly it had become discipline. "You don't get to buy forgiveness," I whispered. His gaze did not waver. "I'm not trying to." "Then what are you doing?" For once, his mouth twisted faintly. Not humor this time. Pain. "Trying not to make your life harder." Cassian sniffed. Both of us looked at him. He stared into his tea. "This is very emotionally mature for a kitchen with 3 mismatched chairs." "Cassian," I warned. "I'm just saying. Growth." Dorian glanced at him. "Do you always comment during war? Only domestic ones?" A breath left me, almost a laugh, almost a sob. The tension cracked, but did not disappear. Dorian looked back at me. "I'll ask next time," he said. The words were small, not dramatic, not enough, but they were different from anything he would have said before. Before, Dorian would have argued that he was right. Now he understood that being right did not give him the right. That was the first repair. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But repair. Later that morning, he left without demanding to know when he could come back. He stood at the door, one hand on the frame, eyes on mine. "I'll give you space." I almost did not believe him. He saw that too. His mouth curved, tired and sharp. "Don't look so suspicious. I'm told people occasionally survive without me in the room." "By who?" "No one reliable." The corner of my mouth moved, barely. His gaze caught it like a starving man catching light. Then he stepped back. No touch, no claim. No pressure, just a nod to Cassian and one final look at me that held everything he was not asking for. When the door closed behind him, the apartment felt larger. Not emptier. Larger. Cassian was quiet for a full minute. Then he said softly, "He's trying." I stared at the pharmacy bag on the counter. "Yes," I whispered, and that was what scared me most. Dorian did give me space. That was the problem. I had expected him to fail at it. A man like Dorian Vercetti did not know how to step back. He conquered rooms, bought solutions, ruined enemies before breakfast, made silence feel like an order. But for 3 days, he did not push. He did not send guards to my door. He did not flood my phone. He did not appear at my desk with that dangerous look that made every thought in my head forget how to stand upright. He sent one message the first night. Cassian's medication schedule is untouched. I won't interfere again without asking. Then another, a minute later. That was not meant to sound like a corporate policy memo. I'm bad at this. I stared at the second message longer than I should have. Then I typed back, "Yes, you are." His reply came almost instantly. Tragically, I'm aware, I did not smile, not fully. But Cassian, sitting across from me with a bowl of soup, looked up and said, "Tell him he's emotionally constipated, but improving." I put my phone face down. "Eat your soup." Deflection. Cowardice. Very disappointing. You're recovering too much personality. Medical miracle. By the third day, Dorian asked before he came. Not ordered. Not assumed. Asked. "There's somewhere I would like to take you. No guards, no office, no pressure. You can say no." I read the message 5 times. Then I said yes before fear could dress itself as wisdom. He picked me up just before sunset in a black car he drove himself. That detail unsettled me. No driver. No security in the front seat. No invisible wall between us and the world. Just Dorian behind the wheel, sleeves rolled, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the city light moving over his face in gold and shadow. He did not tell me where we were going. I did not ask. The silence between us was not easy, but it was honest. Eventually he pulled onto a street I had not seen in years. My breath caught. The old diner sat on the corner, still stubbornly alive between a dry cleaner and a closed bookshop. Its neon sign flickered blue and red. The windows were fogged slightly from warmth inside. The same cracked sidewalk stretched along the front, the place where I had first met him. Not officially, not beautifully. I had been 16, crying behind the diner after a boy from school spread a cruel rumor about my mother. Dorian had found me there, bloody-knuckled from answering that rumor in a way that got him suspended and made me furious. He had not apologized. He had handed me a milkshake and said, "Your taste in enemies is embarrassing." I looked at him now. Why here? Dorian shut off the engine. For a moment, he did not answer. Then he said, "Because this is where I became dangerous for the first time and still tried to be gentle with you." My throat tightened. He stared through the windshield at the diner lights. "I don't want to rewrite what I did, Mirelle. I don't want to stand in front of you and pretend I was only a victim of lies. I believed them because they gave my pain somewhere to go." I swallowed hard. "That doesn't make you evil." His mouth twisted faintly. "Careful, you're ruining my dramatic self-hatred." "I'm serious. So am I." He turned to me. "I destroyed you with certainty I had no right to carry." The words went straight through me. I looked down at my hands. "I loved you," I whispered, "even when I hated that I did." His breath changed, small, sharp. "I never stopped," he said. "I buried it badly, under rage, under pride, under every ugly thing I told myself about you so I could survive not having you." I closed my eyes. Love had never been the missing thing between us. Truth had, trust had, gentleness had. When I opened my eyes, Dorian was watching me like he would accept any verdict I gave him. "I can't go back to being that girl," I said. "I don't want you to. I won't belong to your guilt. You won't. I won't be controlled because you're afraid to lose me again." His jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I know. I need to choose." His voice dropped. "Then choose." No command, no trap, just surrender wearing his face. I reached for him first. Dorian went still when my hand touched his cheek, as if tenderness was more terrifying than violence. "I choose this," I whispered. "Not the past, not the pain, not what they stole. This, you if you keep earning me." His eyes closed. For one moment, the most dangerous man I had ever known looked like he was being spared. Then he turned his face into my palm and kissed it. Not dramatically, not for show, like a promise. We did not go inside the diner. We went home, not his penthouse. Mine. My small apartment with the stubborn lock he still hated, the mismatched chairs Cassian had declared historically important, the kitchen where he had learned to ask before fixing what hurt. Cassian was staying overnight with Mrs. Alvarez from 3B, who had somehow decided Dorian was both suspicious and useful. She had taken one look at him in the hallway and said, "If you hurt her, rich boy, I know people." Dorian had answered, completely serious, "I believe you." That was the first time I truly laughed. Inside my room there was no rush, no grief crashing over us this time, no hallway confession tearing open old wounds. Dorian stood before me and waited. Still dangerous, still intense, still him. But waiting. I stepped closer and kissed him. The kiss was slow at first, almost careful enough to hurt, then deeper, warmer, filled with everything we had not known how to say without breaking. His hands found my waist, but not to claim, to hold, to ask, to remember the scar and honor it instead of fear it. "This is different," I whispered against his mouth. "It should be." His voice was rough. I touched his face. No ghosts tonight. His eyes burned. No ghosts. This time when we came together, it was not grief dragging us under, it was choice. It was Dorian kissing my shoulder like apology could become devotion if repeated by actions long enough. It was my hands learning him without flinching from memory. It was warmth instead of wreckage, hunger softened by desire held carefully enough to feel safe without feeling tame. He still trembled when I said his name. I still cried once, quietly, when the tenderness became too much. But this time he did not panic. He held me, forehead against mine, and waited until the tears passed. Afterward, he wrapped me in the blanket. First. Always first. Then he brought water, checked my bandage, and sat beside me with one hand open on the bed between us, not taking mine until I placed it there. That mattered most. I placed my fingers through his. He looked down at our hands like he had been given something more dangerous than power. "I don't deserve this," he said. "No," I whispered, "but you can earn it." His mouth pressed against my knuckles. "I will." The room was quiet around us, soft, alive. For the first time in 10 years, I did not feel haunted by the girl who loved him before the world broke us. I felt her rest. Dorian leaned close, his voice low against my hair. "You gave me part of your body when we were children," he whispered. "But you had my heart long before that. And this time I stayed." Epilogue. The first time Dorian Vercetti walked back into St. Aurelia's hospital, he did not come for blood. He came for truth. Not quietly, not politely, not with lawyers speaking for him while he stood behind a polished desk pretending his hands were clean. He came himself, and he brought me with him. The hospital had changed in 10 years. The lobby was brighter now. New floors, new reception desk, new donor recognition wall glowing beneath soft white lights, like the building wanted people to believe sacrifice always came with names, flowers, and thank you letters. I stood in front of that wall with my hand tucked inside Dorian's and stared at all the engraved plaques. Gold names, silver names, family names, legacy names. None of them were mine. Dorian's hand tightened, not possessively, carefully, like he had learned the difference. "You don't have to do this," he said. I looked up at him. He wore black. Of course he did. Dorian in black looked less like a man dressed for a meeting and more like judgment had learned tailoring. But there was no cruelty in his face when he looked at me now. Only restraint. Only rage he was holding by the throat because this day belonged to me, not to his vengeance. "Yes," I said, "I do." His jaw flexed once, then he nodded. We walked into the private conference room where St. Aurelia's board waited. Doctors, administrators, legal counsel, people with expensive pens, nervous eyes, and carefully prepared expressions of regret. Dorian did not sit. Neither did I. That unsettled them. Good. The hospital director stood first. "Miss Marin, Mr. Vercetti, we want to begin by saying how deeply sorry we are for the administrative failures that occurred 10 years ago." Dorian laughed. One sound, cold enough to make the man stop breathing. "Administrative failures," he repeated. The director swallowed. "The records were mishandled." "No," Dorian said softly. "Paper gets mishandled. She was erased." The room went silent. My scar burned under my dress. Not with pain, memory. I saw myself at 19 in a hospital bed, mouth dry, body torn open, asking if Dorian had lived, while people who knew the answer treated me like an inconvenience waiting to be removed. I saw Vivienne's pale coat, Vittorio's cane, Lucien's smile, Dorian's face in the ballroom when he believed the lie. For a second, the old grief rose so high I almost drowned in it. Then Dorian's thumb moved once over my knuckles, one quiet reminder. I was not alone in the room this time. I stepped forward. The director looked relieved to turn away from Dorian. That was his mistake. I don't want your apology, I said. His mouth opened, closed. I don't want your regret. I don't want your polished statement. I don't want a donation made in my name by men who can afford guilt better than accountability. Dorian was still beside me, silent now, letting me speak. The most powerful man in the room, and he was not trying to own the moment, he was guarding it. That difference still made my chest ache sometimes. The legal counsel adjusted her glasses. Miss Marin, we understand this is emotional. I looked at her. She stopped moving. Yes, I said. It is. That's what happens when a 19-year-old girl gives a kidney, nearly dies from complications, wakes up alone, and learns the world has decided her sacrifice is too inconvenient to name. No one spoke. Good. Let them sit inside it. Let them learn how silence felt when it was not serving them. I want the donor record corrected, I said. Publicly. Permanently. I want every document tied to that surgery amended with my name restored. I want a formal investigation into who signed, sealed, altered, and buried those files. I want donor protections changed so no powerless patient can be disappeared because a wealthy family finds her unsuitable. The director's face had gone pale. This process may take. Dorian finally moved, just his eyes. The man stopped. Dorian smiled faintly. It was not a pleasant smile. Choose your next words as if your hospital would like to survive the week. The director sat down. I should not have found that satisfying. I absolutely did. The board agreed to everything before noon. By 1, the first corrected record had been signed. By 2, my name appeared where it should have been all along. Living donor, Mirelle Marin. I stared at the page until the letters blurred. Dorian stood behind me, not touching, because he knew some moments needed space before they could accept comfort. You're shaking, he said quietly. I know. Do you want me to hold you? The question broke something small and beautiful inside me. Not because he asked, because he waited for the answer. I turned around. Yes. His arms came around me slowly, carefully, like the first time after he knew the truth, like every time since. Dorian had never become gentle in a way that made him less dangerous. He had become gentle in a way that proved danger could kneel when love required it. I pressed my face into his chest and cried. Not like the girl in the hospital, not like the girl in the rain, not like the woman in the bathroom at Vercetti Global trying to keep her sobs silent. This time, I cried with my name restored, and Dorian held me in the place where I had once been abandoned. A month later, the donor wall changed. St. Aurelia's unveiled a new plaque in the lobby. Not because Dorian paid for it. He offered. I said no. Then he smiled, dark and proud, and said, Good. The hospital paid for it. The board attended. The press attended too, because Dorian made sure the story did not stay convenient. Vivienne Bellmont's name had already become poison in rooms where she used to be worshipped. Her family's foundation collapsed under audit. Every stolen donor claim, every manipulated charitable account, every quiet payment tied to the cover-up came out one by one until her world became exactly what she had made mine, a place where no one believed her. Lucien disappeared from the underworld first, then from legitimate society, then from every table that had once opened for him because of Dorian. No one asked where he went. People had learned not to ask Dorian questions they did not want answered. Vittorio Vercetti lived. That was his punishment. Dorian did not kill him. He did something worse. He removed him from the company, from family control, from every decision involving the Vercetti name. The old man who once told me I was unsuitable now sat alone in a mansion full of portraits, watching his empire continue without his permission. Dorian told me once, very quietly, death would have been kinder. I believed him. The day my plaque went up, Cassian came wearing a suit he hated and shoes he said were trying to assassinate him. Mrs. Alvarez came too, because she claimed she had invested emotionally and wanted a return. Sarah stood near the back, crying into a napkin and denying it was happening. Dorian stood beside me in front of the wall. People turned when he entered. They always did. He still carried danger like a birthright. Still made powerful men check their posture. Still looked at the world like it had disappointed him before breakfast and would likely do so again before lunch. But when he looked at me, the whole room changed, not softened, focused, like every violent thing in him had finally learned where home was. The hospital director stepped to the podium and spoke carefully. He said my name, my full name, Mirelle Marin, living donor, survivor, the woman whose sacrifice saved Dorian Vercetti's life. The applause came slowly at first, then louder. It should have felt like victory. It did, a little. But mostly it felt like mourning. For the girl who should have heard it 10 years ago. For the love that should not have had to crawl through lies to survive. For the body that gave and the heart that broke and the years no plaque could return. Dorian must have known because his hand found mine. I looked down at our joined fingers. He wore no ring, neither did I. Not yet. Dorian had asked once, not with a diamond, with annulment papers for every emotional debt between us. That was what he called them. A ridiculous phrase, but very Dorian. He had placed a folder on my kitchen table one evening, while Cassian pretended very poorly to read in the living room. Inside were documents giving me full legal separation from every financial assistance he had arranged for Cassian, every apartment repair, every medical trust, every security measure. Nothing tied to him. Nothing that could trap me. Nothing that made love feel like payment. Then beneath those papers was a small black box. I had stared at it. Dorian had looked almost calm. Almost. You don't have to open it. Then why bring it? Because I'm apparently optimistic now. It's humiliating. Inside was a ring. Simple. Beautiful. Not the kind a man used to prove wealth. The kind a man chose because he had learned the woman wearing it did not need to be purchased. I had not answered that night. I had kissed him instead, then told him I needed time. Dorian had closed the box, kissed my forehead, and said, "Take all of it." And he had meant it. That was why I loved him now. Not because he was sorry, not because he was beautiful when broken, not because he could destroy enemies for me, but because he had learned that love was not taking the answer before I was ready to give it. In the hospital lobby after the ceremony, Dorian and I stood alone before the new plaque. Everyone else had drifted toward the reception area, where Cassian was charming 3 nurses and Mrs. Alvarez was interrogating a surgeon about parking validation. My name gleamed beneath the lights. I reached out and touched the engraving. For a moment, I felt 19 again. Then Dorian spoke behind me. I hated myself when I first saw the record. I did not turn around. I know. No, he said quietly. You don't. I looked back then. His face was controlled, but his eyes were not. I read every note, every complication, every hour they left you alone, every signature that buried you. And all I could think was that my body kept living because yours suffered, and I spent 10 years making you suffer more. My throat tightened. Dorian, I know you hate when I say it, because you can't live there forever. His mouth twisted. I'm not trying to. Yes, you are. He went still. I stepped closer, looking up at him. You think if you keep punishing yourself, it balances the scale. His jaw tightened. It doesn't. No, I said. It doesn't. It just makes me watch the man I love bleed over wounds I am trying to heal from. His eyes closed briefly. When he opened them, the rawness there nearly stole my breath. I don't know how to forgive myself. I placed my hand over his chest. His heart beat hard beneath my palm. Then don't start there. His brows drew together. Start by loving me well enough that I never have to wonder if my pain is safe with you. For a long moment, he did not speak. Then his hand came up, covering mine. I can do that. I know. His eyes searched my face. You do? Yes. The word felt like a door opening. Not backward, forward. I reached into my coat pocket and took out the black ring box. Dorian froze. Completely. The great Dorian Vercetti, who could terrify boardrooms and dismantle empires with a phone call, stood in a hospital lobby staring at a small velvet box like it might kill him. You brought it, he said. I did. His voice dropped. Mirelle? I'm not saying yes because you hurt enough. His face tightened. I'm not saying yes because you saved Cassian's medication, or fixed the deadbolt, or ruined the people who ruined us. He did not breathe. I'm saying yes because when I told you to give me space, you did. When I told you not to buy forgiveness, you stopped trying to pay for pain. When I told you love could not survive without trust, you started building trust even when it terrified you. His eyes burned. And because I love you, I whispered, still, differently now, wiser, less innocent, but real. Dorian looked wrecked. Beautifully, violently wrecked. Say that again, he said. I smiled through tears. No, you heard me. His laugh broke out of him, low and shaken, and then he was kissing me in front of the donor wall, in the hospital that had once stolen my name, with my name shining behind us like proof. Not a possessive kiss. Not a desperate one. A grateful one. A vow before the vow. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. I will spend my life earning that yes. I know. Don't let me become easy. That made me laugh. You? Easy? His mouth curved. Fair. I opened the box. He took the ring out with fingers that were not quite steady. That, more than anything, made me cry. Dorian Vercetti did not tremble for war. He trembled for me. He slid the ring onto my finger slowly, reverently, like he understood that he was not claiming what he owned. He was being trusted with what he had almost lost. Cassian's voice rang across the lobby. Finally! I turned. He was standing near the reception desk with Mrs. Alvarez, Sarah, 3 nurses, and half the hospital staff watching. Mrs. Alvarez wiped her eyes and pointed at Dorian. Don't mess it up, rich boy. Dorian looked at her, completely serious. I don't plan to, Cassian snorted. Great, romantic and terrifying, very on brand. I laughed then. Really laughed. In St. Aurelia's hospital, in front of the wall that finally carried my name, with my brother alive, with the man I had loved before grief, after hatred, and through the impossible repair standing beside me. Dorian pulled me close, his hand warm at my waist, careful over the scar beneath my dress, always careful now. That was the love story, really. Not that he became harmless, not that I became unbroken, but that the most dangerous man I had ever known learned tenderness in the exact places he once caused pain. And I, the girl who had once given him part of my body, finally learned that love did not have to mean disappearing inside someone else's survival. Sometimes love meant standing in front of your own name and choosing the man who had to earn the right to say it. Dorian leaned close, his voice low enough for only me. Mrs. Vercetti? I looked up at him. Not yet. His mouth curved, a flicker of old danger, old humor, old Dorian. No? Earn the wedding first. His eyes darkened with emotion, not possession, with pleasure. I slipped my hand into his. This time, I did not feel like a ghost. This time, no one stole my place. This time, when Dorian Vercetti walked out of St. Aurelia's hospital alive, my name walked with him, and for the first time in 10 years, so did I. Thank you so much for listening to this emotional, dark Mafia romance. Mirelle and Dorian's story was about love, sacrifice, betrayal, regret, and the kind of truth that can destroy a man before it heals him. If this story made you feel something, please hit the like button. Likes help YouTube know this is the kind of emotional romance you want more of. Leave a comment and tell me the moment that broke you the most. Was it the scar reveal, the truth in Chapter 10, the hallway confession, or the epilogue at St. Aurelia's? And if you love dark, obsessive, emotional Mafia romance audiobooks with powerful men, wounded women, savage regret, and earned happily ever afters, subscribe to Bayless Audiobooks so you don't miss the next story. This story was written and created by Bayless. Please do not copy, repost, or reuse this story without permission. I will see you the next book. Until then, stay ruined.